At this point, if we could all rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. John Greenham, if you can lead us in a pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with our resolutions.
All right, it gives me great pleasure. We have a couple of resolutions tonight. And do we roll call into open set? We did, right? We roll called it. I just want to make sure, between the breaks. So I'm going to do two resolutions from my seat here. But of course, I'm sure Angela Adolph will help us with some HR, some PR, or if I could get a colleague who might take some pictures, because we've got some, not only our honoree for this first resolution, but a distinguished guest is with him. This first formal recognition for the board is on behalf of Dr. John Greenan, who recently in our community received a very distinguished award. So without further ado, I'm just going to read the resolution. Whereas Dr. John Greenan was presented with a distinguished alumni award by the University of St. Francis, and whereas Dr. John Greenan graduated from the University of St. Francis with a Bachelor's of Art in History and Master's of Science in Educational Leadership, and a doctorate in education in educational leadership, and has volunteered in the University of St. Francis's Student Alumni Mentoring Program, and is currently a College of Education ambassador. And whereas Dr. John Greenan, in his 23rd year at Lockport Township High School District 205, and his first year as Assistant Superintendent for Personnel. Now, therefore, it be resolved on this, the 21st day of October, 2024, by the Board of Education of Lockport Township High School District 205, that Dr. John Greenan is recognized for his service, commitment, and contribution to Lockport Township High School District 205 as a University of St. Francis distinguished alumni. Outstanding, outstanding. Dr. Green, you have anything to, and certainly you have somebody to introduce, but congratulations, acknowledgement at your college, your peer, and your education. Yeah. Right? I think somebody's going to take a picture of both of us here.
Let's go. Can I move you so we don't have chairs behind you?
You can do whatever you would like us to do. Does anybody have a crate? Who's with you tonight?
My dad, Jim Green, is here tonight. My wife is in between picking up my daughter from dance, my son from basketball, and my mom is visiting my sister in Texas, but I think they're watching on the live stream. So,
Of course.
but my dad, Jim, is here, so thank you for the resolution and this.
Absolutely.
Honor. Spent a lot of time at USF, so it was really nice to get an award from their College of Education. And Dr. Gambro, I appreciate the university, and thank you for the recognition tonight.
Congratulations.
You're a Lockport legend. Anything to say about this fine individual? It's so rare that parents get to see their children at work, but you do all the time. So congratulations to you being a great, Parenting Matters. Anything you want to tell us about Dr. John Greenan?
Thank you, Doctor. I think it speaks for itself, he at least listens to me and got an education, So, I'm very proud that he's up here with this great school, and he seems to fit in right, and can't say enough for staff up here, and how great this place is. I happened to graduate from here a little while back, and it's just gotten better, that's all. It's gotten better, so it's in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. All right, should I go right into our second resolution? Our second resolution is, you might not know, October is National Principal Month. I will always say, I believe high school principal, toughest job in education in America. I really believe that. It's not just because I did it for 14 years. But we do want to recognize, and Dr. Carrie Green is here, so she is going to get the resolution on behalf of her colleagues. She had to stay in the district for some things going on, but Dr. Jacqueline Johnson is actually down in Peoria at the state state principal conference, enjoying that. And it's always in October because of Principal Appreciation Month. Whereas Lockport Township High School principals Dr. Jacqueline Johnson, Dr. Carrie Green, Dr. Jason Oswald, Mr. Matthew Bartley, Mr. Robert Beach, and Mr. Josh Oster for their daily contributions to the students, staff members, parents, and guardians, District Office Administration, Board of Education, and the Lockport Township communities. And whereas Dr. Jacqueline Johnson, Dr. Carrie Green, Dr. Jason Oswald, Mr. Matthew Bartley, Mr. Robert Beach, and Mr. Josh Oster serve as building principals and assistant principals, having attained the appropriate experience, education, and licensure to do so. Whereas Dr. Jacqueline Johnson, Dr. Carrie Green, Dr. Jason Oswald, Mr. Matthew Bartley, Mr. Robert Beach, and Mr. Josh Oster daily navigate the challenges and opportunities of leading two large public high school buildings, providing students and staff members with safety and the opportunity to learn, collaborate to ensure that our district is cohesive in its approach to student achievement, respond to the daily needs of students, staff members, and parents, provide leadership for the staff members assigned to their respective buildings, and serve as instructional leaders in a modern high school setting. And whereas Dr. Jacqueline Johnson, Dr. Carrie Green, Dr. Jason Oswald, Mr. Matthew Bartley, Mr. Robert Beach, and Mr. Josh Oster embody on a daily basis and understand that their success and accomplishments are part of a broader team effort and living our slogans, best self, best work, and together we succeed. Now, therefore, be it resolved on this 21st day of October, 2024, by the Board of Education of Lockport Township High School District 205, that Dr. Jacqueline Johnson, Dr. Carrie Green, Dr. Jason Oswald, Mr. Matthew Bartley, Mr. Robert Beach, Mr. Josh Oster are hereby recognized for their service, commitment, and contribution as part of National Principals Month in October 2024. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well done. You do not have to get up, Doctor, because you are scooter bound. So thank you for accepting this on behalf of your colleagues. Come on, I'll do a kneel down. Oh, you're going to do a stand up.
Yes.
Backing around with this.
There you go. Thank you, Alice.
All right.
That's okay.
Yeah, great job. And I will say, I mean, just, literally, I was a high school principal for 14 years. I faithfully one time said to Dr. Green, and if it doesn't thrill you, it will kill you. And it is just, it's a tough and lovable job because you're just so dynamic and, every day is a different day, and we're blessed to have these building principals who are running, two big buildings. And it's not easy. And, I always say if you have a couple thousand people in a lot of places in the United States, that's called a town, right? And the place lives and breathes and acts like a town with all the things, glorious and difficult that come up, and they just handle it, with grace and stamina and fortitude and commitment. And I would say the last thing is all of those folks that we just read off just have a whole bunch of integrity and class. And that's, what students need to see when they're walking the hallways of their school, is models of adults who are doing the right things in the right way. So, great job.
Thank you. And congratulations to those
bet.
principals. All right, do I have a motion to accept the resolutions as presented?
So moved.
And I could second that. All right, it's been motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. All right, next we have our board salutes. Let's see, I think my board salutes is going to be to our student board members, Avery Colella and Mia Fontanella. It was a week ago, I believe, on a Friday morning. It was the Will County Center for Economic Development, and they came in to talk to us about a summer internship programs that they were offering, and our two student board members, really, they led that whole presentation. So, but thank you. And just afterwards, just talking to some of the people that were there present, they were very astounded at your presentation, the way you conducted yourself, asking questions, everything was really, they were impressed. And they really, they thanked us, the board, the administrators, the teachers. They said, oh my God, you guys are doing phenomenal. I said, yes. So you guys were rock stars. You guys, no. All right. Lance?
Yes, I have a couple Wanted to salute teachers Sarah Steinke, Will Salick, as well as the PR Director Castillo and her team, Eric Slager and Grace Gonzalez, for their recognition as one of the 4 finalists for the State Science Teacher of the Year, the New Teacher of the Year, and multiple awards for public relations and communications.
Nice job.
I have a few, but I think I would like to shout out to the foundation. I attended 2 foundation events between September and October. One was the community event downtown, which I thought was great. Thanks, Ann, for letting me pal around with you. It was really good. A nice turnout, I thought, and Angela, you did a great job, and the band was good, and the atmosphere was fun. So thanks very much for putting that on. That's a lot of work. And then the Young Hearts for Life event, that was just a pleasure to volunteer for, and then to see the actual amount of volunteers that the community came forth and brought and participated in. And it was nice to see a nice diverse group of folks that came to volunteer. And then it was just really nice to kind of interact with the students. I was on the girls' side, and so they were just a pleasure. And they handled everything, which was kind of an awkward scenario, but they handled it all very well. And I thought it went really well, and it was really well run. So thanks for doing that and helping watch out for a few folks that actually did have some events that they needed to have checked out.
I think I want to board salute the open house meetings, open forum meetings that we've had, and the community members who went to it, as well as some of the administrators and people who helped run it. I genuinely believe that open forum meeting, whatever we end up calling it, is the best way for us to be able to reach out to our community and be able to speak to them. I think the openness and the way that it's the community members who get to lead the conversation, as well as being able to break up into groups and communicate with some of our members about what they believe is the biggest problems in our community, as well as what they want to see implemented, is genuinely the best thing that we could do when it comes to our outreach towards our community. And the fact that we have a group of individuals and administrations who is able to be experts of the field, depending on which conversation that these community members want to talk about, as well as their ability to handle and kind of keep it in tow, keep things under control, being able to try something new, and as we continue to develop and refine this, to be able to be with that. So thank you for all of that, everybody.
Good stuff. Thanks for being
And
there.
the next one is the 24th, this Thursday. Please
Plus,
show up.
Right, you get 6:15, you can see the fine work of Berglund Construction, and then 7 o'clock in the library, the event will start proper. So,
All right, thank you.
at Central Campus,
Yes,
if we didn't say that enough.
Up.
Yeah.
Again, the best way, in my opinion, for us to be able to talk to the community.
Okay, thank you, Zion, and thank you, Candace, and thank you. It's okay, moving on.
Do you guys want to salute? You got something on your, okay, I see, I see
right,
you. I'm not the
okay.
president, I'm not going to recognize you, but.
Okay,
Okay. This month, I wanted to recognize the College and Career Center within our guidance department, specifically the work of Mrs. Crosby, for multiple aspects. One, each week I get nice emails every Friday reminding me of the college rep visits that are going to be happening that week, which for starters is just great communication that works, I feel, really well. I've personally attended these college rep visits. Each one of them I've come out of feeling more knowledgeable about the college, feeling great getting to meet someone from the college. And Miss Crosby is always there asking questions that I hadn't thought of myself. And I just really appreciate her knowledge and her wisdom on the topics of college and career readiness. And especially this week with our college and career fair coming up on Thursday. I attended the fair last year, and again, there was a great variety of schools present at the fair. I was really able to talk to great reps, get kind of a feel of the colleges that I wanted to apply to. It was a great starter to my college application journey. And so overall, I feel their work has been very effective. And being a senior this year and kind of living in the college and career world, I'm very grateful for all of their efforts for us.
I wanted to salute our teachers and staff. I feel, so I was out from Wednesday until Saturday at our lead conference for Skills USA, which was an incredible experience. But I was out, and you miss a lot of school during that time. And I just want to thank all my teachers for handling it with respect, and just, they really truly helped me out, helped me get caught up in everything. So we have really just wonderful staff here.
Thank you. All right, great. All right, moving on, our student reports. Do we have no students? No.
We've got the two board
Two
members.
board members, okay.
So there are two main things that Avery and I wanted to highlight this board meeting. And the first one I'm going to talk on is we had our second Superintendent's Advisory Council meeting at the beginning of this month. And I just wanted to kind of recap what we did that meeting, the work that we did, and the work that we're heading towards. So this past meeting, we kind of first led with a presentation that Izzy McCormick, one of our executive board members, she led, and she mainly talked about three main possibilities to revising the Bell schedule, and that is adding a 0 hour, making an 8-period day, or doing a block schedule. And in the presentation, we kind of evaluated the pros and cons of each of those different options, which I felt was a great beginner discussion to the Bell schedule work that we're going to be doing all year long. And then after that presentation, students were given options of main areas that they could join, of sort of like a focus group that they're going to be working on all year long. And those options were curriculum and course offerings, yearly school calendar and dates, facilities and needed improvements, guidance and student advising, and then cell phone policies and practices. So as you can see, these 5 groups kind of, they're a wide array of topics and things. So we're gonna be working on pretty much, I feel like, every sort of aspect to the school day and school year this year in our Superintendent's Advisory Council. And then as board members, me and Avery are a part of the cell phone practices and policies group. And then Michael and Wazira are part of the calendar group, because we felt those two were main ones that we could discuss in board meetings and directly impact board policy and board discussion. And then in our cell phone group specifically, we mainly talked about ways that we could conduct research on, one, how students feel about cell phones, how teachers feel about cell phones, and then also within the guidance department, how do, like, the effects of cell phones, what are they seeing within their department? So we're excited because I think we have a good solid foundation of ideas on ways that we can get going on this cell phone conversation.
And then I just wanted to go over our Will County CED breakfast. It was a phenomenal experience just being up there and presenting to these amazing business and industry partners. And I actually had met Representative Avalar at one of our Skills USA conferences, so it was super great to see her again. But we just really presented on what Lockport offers as for our classes to be career ready. There were limited time, so we only got to present on a few. But we were really just trying to show that our students are career ready here and we are prepared for the workforce. And it was super cool to see how they handled getting those internships and just really connecting the student to the career. So that would just be a really great opportunity for our students here.
Do you guys have any questions for us? Okay. Do you guys have any questions for us at all?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we have no student government, right?
Right.
No. Okay,
Where are they?
next, I don't,
I'll talk to you a little later.
all right, next we have Berglund Construction.
Come on down.
Okay.
I think, you guys are here, and I will get your presentation, and if it's okay, Neil, I will be your, and I might pull up a different version of your presentation. Okay, good. I will be your clicker man.
Okay.
If that's
Sounds good.
okay. And just introducing Berglund, I think the board already knows, you're a very, DLA, one of the things that DLA does for us as architects is work with construction companies, work with contractors. They help vet the quality out there, and obviously we needed a quality team in rebuilding the more difficult job last summer of rebuilding the ceilings that were demolition. It's, almost always easy to tear things down. Maybe these folks don't think so. A little harder to put them back up. And then also to take on the challenges of what you might find, as I've shared with the board. If I take on a project in my home, I'm really happy if I can do it in one day on a Saturday and only 3 trips to Home Depot. If it's Sunday night and I've been to Home Depot enough that they recognize me by name, it's probably not good. And we were just very lucky to have Berglund come alongside us, do the work that they did. I would just preface, before they get into their presentation, I was a very nervous superintendent because there were a couple different junctures we really set up on our communications sort of timeline, certain dates, the middle of June, the end of June, the middle of July, where I was working with people like Mrs. Kishline to say, middle of June, we were going to make a decision whether A, we were going to open on August 19th, B, delay opening for the entire district, maybe 2 weeks, or C, return for a period of time to Lincoln Way North High School. Those were all on the table, and in each of those junctures, we were facing big decisions about the building. Probably the biggest was when we made the decision about some significant, on the north side of the building, masonry work. And what I appreciated is doing so with confidence. When Berglund said, we can move forward and open on time, I just felt confident in that piece of advice, that was going to happen. And I think our community had emotionally a lot on the line. I couldn't go any place in the community. I certainly couldn't go to a restaurant in the community without someone asking me if we were opening on time. And I think psychologically with our staff, they wanted that stability as well. So we found a terrific partner. I'm going to let Neil Offerman or the team roll out as you guys would roll out, introduce yourselves. Also, just preface that for the board that, as you know, we've received many requests for qualifications for a construction manager, and really going into further work at Central with the idea of using an architect, a construction manager, and obviously us as owners. Something Robin Schwartz really endorses as an approach to major and elongated construction. Shared with the board, some comparisons, and what we're really doing, and we've talked, is moving forward with Berglund and getting prepared for your next month. We always like to give you a month to think things through and mull things over, of coming back with a contract. But at this stage, Bill Thompson, Stephanie Croy, and I would be recommending Berglund. And I think tonight's also a real opportunity for you to get to know this team and start assessing how you'll feel in a month. And obviously your vote and your endorsement of that team is obviously very, very important. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Neil, and just tell me if you want me to advance things, all right?
So Jeff, you want to get things started?
Sure. Well, I'll start and just say thank you very much for having us. I'm Jeff Berglund. I'm part of the family ownership of our company, as well as the president of our building division, the division of our company that oversaw the work at Lockport. It was really a joy to work with Dr. McBride and your team and on a beautiful building. The celebration at the end was phenomenal, really fun to be there. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about our company. You can go to the next slide, Dr. McBride, when you're ready. Thank you. So we were founded in 1911 on the southeast side of Chicago by, it'd be my great-grandfather, so I'm 4th generation at the company. And we were founded actually as a building facade maintenance repair company. So my great-grandfather's name was Fred. Fred ran around the south side of Chicago and tuck-pointed buildings, maintained buildings. Over time, we expanded into a full-service general contractor company, but that history in building facade maintenance and repair is important, especially for your project, because that's remained a core part of what we do. So when we got into the project and realized there would be a little bit more significant masonry repairs than were anticipated, we have that capability in-house. That's our restoration division that does that type of work on historic buildings all over the Midwest and really around the country. So this project was a great example for us of bringing together all the things that we do best as a company on an historic building to deliver a great project. You can go to the next slide, please. So the team that's here today, and I'll let Hansel kind of talk to you how we're structured and everything like that, and you know who was part of the project that's here today.
So as you can see, it takes a village to support these guys and to deliver this project on time and successfully. So in addition to Chad, Neil, and Gary, who was on site every single day, it's my job as Senior Vice President to support them and give them the resources that they need on a daily basis to make sure they're successful. And so in addition to Jack Trivia and all the way down to the accountant that submits the invoice, it definitely takes a village to deliver the project. So I'm going to let Neil and Chad talk a little bit more about what we encountered this summer.
So again, Chad Todd-Hunter is our project executive on the project, working with Neil. So maybe to your point, Dr. McBride, it started out easy enough. You look at the drawings, you walk, and we bid the project, and it seemed simple, doing some ceiling repairs, right? Well, that kind of turned into understanding the mission once we got involved was about the safety of the students and, focusing not so much how quickly can you put it back, but working with the team to identify any other issues. And I'd say sometimes in projects, unfortunately, you have costs, but I think in this project, fortunately, we had a great team, and we were able to identify some other issues that the engineers were on top of, and we're able to, fix those. And the end goal was not just get people back in, but get the children back into a safe building. So, through those of new ceilings, light and bright, and the exterior of the building, the ultimate overview of this project as we got more involved is safety of the students, and then really, longevity of quite a beautiful building itself. And as Jeff had pointed out, when we took on this challenge, it really hit our book of business as a great challenge because it combined our general contracting side with our restoration side, and to blend both of those is really where we excel. And I think many of you have kind of seen what we're able to pull off, but really all that said wouldn't have been possible without, Neil being there day to day, and he'll talk a little bit about just what are some of the challenges we had and what did we learn, about this particular project.
Next slide. So I'm Neil Offerman. I'm the senior project manager. I'm the one that was running the project with Gary Sproul on site. So Gary Sproul, is superintendent, is kind of the, let's say, nuts and bolts. He has the experience of being a carpenter. He runs the field, gets the guys there every day, making sure they're all working on the right tasks. And I'm there to assist him to make sure everything stays on schedule, talking to the owners, making sure that everything is being communicated properly to each team. So what did we learn on this project, and really, or what do we want to highlight on this project? And the first thing we kind of already encompassed was the team. So obviously, we kind of hit that we have these two divisions, and we were able to kind of synergize that and come together as a team in that regard. But outside of Berglund, I think working with DLA, Berg Engineering, Peace Borst, as well as West Janey and the Lockport facility team, we sat in these OAC meetings, which is the owner, architect, contractor meetings. We do them weekly, and they're more update meetings, communications, trying to figure out how we're proceeding on the next couple of weeks of work. And I've sat in a few of these over the years that have gotten quite confrontational because issues come up and everyone wants to kind of shake the issue off, saying it's not really my problem, this is your problem, and it starts a bad trend for the project. And that was quite opposite here. We sat down together, and I think we all kind of came to this cohesive unit of, hey, we're here for a purpose, and it's for these students and it's for the community to get this up and running. And it was quite an experience because I think without the team being so uplifting with each other, we wouldn't have got those students there on time, because I think we all had the same goal in mind. So I think having the right team is obviously a critical step in getting the construction project done. You can go to the next slide, please.
You bet.
So the next highlight, I think, is a given one, mainly the project, and that's the ceiling repairs. So we talk about schedule, talk about budget, obviously two huge factors in this project. And one thing that we maybe not talk enough is quality. So we had to do this stuff quickly. We had to make sure we had the right manpower working in certain aspects of this building. We had to remove the remaining plaster ceilings for safety. And then we had to install drywall ceilings and then the actual ceilings underneath those. So there was almost like a cake layer of these ceilings that we had to get installed. And the interesting thing about it was we had to have each facet of that ceiling inspected for safety, right? But also for quality. With those inspections, we were able to, one, make sure that what we were installing was gonna last you guys a very long time, as well as we were able to get multiple eyes on these ceilings and the structural integrity of the buildings. That's when we found small minor things, I'd say, but we found other things to be able to correct and repair. So as part of these quality inspections, I think it was the fact that we had multiple eyes looking at these ceilings while they are opened up, to be able to make sure we rectified any existing issues in the building. So with the majority of the ceilings down and throughout the summer, we had a lot of personnel looking at these ceilings to be able to make sure that what we have done, not only this summer, but hopefully, the years to come, will last many years, right? So, next slide, please. And then obviously, I think this is obviously the big, celebration, right? We got everyone in on time. It was stressful. I think Dr. McBride hit the nail on the head. Every meeting was a question directed to Berglund of when will you be done? We were manning the job up as much as possible. There was a lot of space in this building. As you guys know, it's a fairly large building, so we were able to accommodate quite an amount of trades workers at one time, from working Saturdays and Sundays and trying to get as much work as done in the given time that we were given. So I think I'd say the last 4 weeks, when we were able to confidently say, if we're working around the clock, we'll be able to get this done. And the fact that it did kind of, I think it was like that Friday before you were opening up the job, where we really finished punch list and everything, I think it was a big relief off our shoulders. We were confident. We knew we were going to get it done, but still, we felt the pressure that you guys were feeling, and we wanted to make sure that it was. So I think after we got those students in, it was a uplifting feeling, I think, for everybody. Right, next slide.
And just for the board, just a footnote, you might recall that in our original planning, we had about a 2-week period where we would extend, workers would still be in the building, we'd be finishing areas, and Berglund was ahead of that. So we were really done, except for some punch list items, some things that Neil had to hang up. So, Berglund beat that deadline.
Yeah, there were, and you talked about it earlier before, too. We had different options about potentially closing some classrooms while we finished up the masonry repairs that we found during the project. And I think just the fact we were able to get everything done in the original amount of time, not the original, we were still extended, but before school actually started was, I think, a phenomenal job on the entire team's part. So then we'll go into some project learnings. So learning number one, and kind of just talked about it, was masonry. We were able to open up certain masonry walls. You guys have a few different layers of CMU brick, ranging from 4-inch to 6-inch layers of common brick, and then you have your exterior brick. So you really have 3 layers of an exterior wall on that north side, the original campus. What we didn't know was the lintel damage when we first started opening up those walls, and that was the point of really the investigative, forensic investigations by the structural engineers. They sought these out. They knew, based off of the interior walls, that there were a reason to investigate further. So as we went in, we're able to kind of tear apart these walls, kind of really understand the makeup of your structural building, and then figure out a plan how to fix it. And that's where Jack Tribia, our president of restoration, really came in. He actually had a hand sketch that we submitted to the architect of exactly how we're going to put the masonry back together. I thought that was very interesting because he's obviously been doing this for, I think, like 40 years here at Berglund. And he lives and breathes masonry, and I think he was a leader to be able to give us the solutions that we needed with the engineers, of course. It was a collaborative effort, but to give us to that right path. So with opening up your structure and understanding kind of what the makeup of your structure is, we also had to put engineered scaffolding, which is the picture that we're showing you right now. When we took out these lintels, we had to support the roof structure and bring that load all the way down to the ground level, as well as inside of your classrooms, we had to span each slab down to each level. So we had quite a significant amount of scaffolding to be able to hold the building up. And the engineering behind that, I think what I want to say is the lessons learned on exactly how we were able to get that whole north and south portion of the existing building kind of shored while we did those repairs. So I think that's a very important knowledge to have, because of the makeup of your building is pretty unique. It's, again, 100 years old, so you don't come across these buildings very often, but it is obviously very beautiful, and we love the opportunity to keep on restoring this. So if you want to move to the next slide. So then that brings into what, we want to talk about today too, is sustainable maintenance. So right now, we believe we got obviously the main issue resolved. You have your students in your building now, and you want to be able to put money and work into this building. Obviously, if anyone lives in an old house, you understand that things go out, quite regularly. It's just the nature of owning and maintaining a home or a school, right? So what we understand now, what DLA is working on right now, are some life safety upgrades and repairs, as well as a new roof and some tuck pointing. And we understand that putting your money or tax dollars towards these repairs, I think is worthwhile, because it's going to give you the return on investment of a sustainable building for years to come. We've already opened this thing up once. We've seen a lot of the bones of this building, and they were built very, very strong back in the day, and obviously it just needs a little bit of, let's say, TLC on a year-to-year basis, and I think your money will be spent very well by keeping this building open for numerous years. And then we can go to the next slide. I believe that's just going to go to our questions. So I guess to summarize, we came together as a team. We obviously very appreciated everything that Lockport did to make sure that we were successful out on the construction site as well. And we would obviously relish the opportunity to keep working as a partner for the community and Lockport on future projects or anything else that you guys would deem necessary or deem us as a partner. So we'll open up to the questions to anyone who has questions on the project or Berglund Construction as a whole. But again, we want to thank you for your time, and again, really appreciate it.
All right, well, first of all, on behalf of the Board of Education, thank you, Chad and Neil, because I know that was one of the concerns that we as a board members, were, the student safety. And of course, a lot of the community members that I encountered, when is it going to be open? Are the freshmen coming, back to that building? And of course, every day it was changing. Dr. McBride, he was constantly going over there and giving us updates as far as how the process was going, and it was moving, and I was very confident. And I live only a block away from that school. So yes, so even when I was just walking, I could see, your people were working there on weekends. So it was like, and that, even a lot of the community members that lived there, they were just astounded to say, oh my gosh, they're working on a Sunday. So that was very impressive. And that just shows the commitment that you really, gave us and gave the whole community, that, you wanted the school open on time. But I thank you.
Yeah, I've got three things. The first one, obviously, thank for all the work, all the effort to get our kids back in school on time, and even teachers being in there early to try and get all their stuff organized. Second thing is I happen to be on a tour in another board position that I have with the Heritage Corridor Destinations Group with Greg Peerbolt, who's the executive director of the Will County Historical Museum, who provides oversight over the Joliet State Prison, the historic prison, not the current prison at Stateville. And he could not speak more highly of the work that you were doing there. You think that we have challenges at Central. The entire administration building, the roof caved in, took out 3 floors of all the floors, rubble 25 feet high or so, fully removed all of that, stabilized all the walls so that in the future, there are opportunities to interpret the history of that building and the history of what went on there. And then the work that you're doing in the chapel on that building or on the campus is quite extensive, even to the point where we're labeling bricks and figuring out where they all go. So great job there, and it gave me a lot of confidence in evaluating not only the work that you've done for the district, but also work that you do outside the district, and not for us, and no pressure related to schools or anything like that, but it was very satisfying to hear that, unsolicited, just simply while we were on the tour, was talking a lot about you. The third question that I have, and for me, it's a very important one because of lots of discussion over the past 2 years about, third-party reviews of what we have and how long it can last, and a number of those different aspects of the topic of Central School. You've worked in the 1908 section, the 1928 section, haven't worked quite as much in the 1958 section, which is actually almost 3/5 or 2/5 of the building itself. In evaluating the two oldest sections that you have seen and extensively seen just in the tours that I've gone through when the ceilings were fully opened, my question for you is, if we do these life safety improvements, if we make the improvements that are necessary to bring the building back up to what it was, based on what you've seen, based on the foundation systems, all of those different types of components, do you have any sense for, is this a 20-year lifespan, 40-year lifespan, 60-year lifespan, or longer? Where we could use the building absent, design features and, 21st century education, all the different things that people talk about when we redesign a building. What I want to make sure that I understand is, from a third-party person who we had no clue who you were before the bids were opened 4 months ago now. What is your opinion on the building's suitability for the long term?
So are you mostly asking the structural, like the bones of it, of what's gonna?
Well, let's say we do all the life safety components that the board has looked at doing related to what DLA has presented, the improvements that you have made already related to the ceilings, some of the masonry, the components of the walls, all the stuff that you have seen, the reports that you have seen from Peace Borst, the evaluations from Wisjani, the work that DLA has done on the overall building that I'm sure were a part of your plans as you were looking at those. That's really the question, is we do all of those things, is this, how long of a term, is this a highly useful building for education?
So I think, you want, okay. I mean, I think as General Neal had stated, being the older building, the bones of the building are good. I think we've accomplished a lot last summer with structurally getting it there.
Yeah.
Understanding that ultimately, if I'm correct, looking at that roof repair this summer. So if you do that roof, you'll get we get 20 years on your roof as a standard warranty. And I think if you continue to look at your maintenance and your tuck pointing, then it's 20, 40, 60 years. I mean, we're in buildings all the time that are older than that. So I think as a core building, you've already made the investment, and I don't think you're too much further away from having a good, solid, to your point of keeping the moisture out. That's probably what we saw as a lot of the issues is moisture got in over time on the lintels, the roof, things haven't been repaired. I think you make that investment and keep the water out, solid building. And then as you would go, every so many years, you'll probably make increased investments on your mechanical systems, things like that. We did not really touch this, so I can't speak totally to how well our mechanicals are, but the building is a good, solid building, and, almost, really sets the tone there for the landmark and that type of architecture as well. So something else to be proud of, in my opinion.
Awesome.
Once you tuck point a building, we generally suggest about 30 years from that point, or do, masonry restoration.
Yeah.
You evaluate it. I mean, many buildings don't have to be retuck pointed in 30 years, but that's kind of in my mind, what I always think of, every 30 years, you might be tuck pointing a building. And tuck pointing is preventive maintenance. You know, the buildings are designed for mortar to erode over time so that your masonry doesn't erode over time. So by default, by design of owning a masonry building, you should be tuck pointing it, you know, with some regularity, but that'd be every 30 years, which is not very regular.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I think about it, it's, you know, as long as the foundation system is good, as long as the exterior envelope is solid, and as long as the roof is preventative from moisture and other components making its way into the building, that's really the first step in holding honestly, any building up for a very long term. You can always make interior changes, you can always adjust things here and there, move walls and things like that, but it's good to hear, again, from somebody that hadn't been involved for the last 2 years as we've evaluated the referendum and all those components, just, you know, that kind of confidence in what the building is today.
All right. I guess that's it. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you
very
for
much.
having us.
Appreciate
and we
it.
Yeah, and do you have any questions for us? I mean, anything on your mind that, or you feel like you're good?
No, I don't think we do.
Well, Avery asked us if we'd come to, what was the name of the?
Skills USA.
Skills USA and do a presentation on construction as a career. So we're looking forward to doing that as well when
Great.
the time arises.
And speaking of which, the only thing I want you to be thinking about are student internships. So I will probably maybe reach out to Neil first, and, you know, if we were able to move forward, I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but I think the board would be very interested if there were some student interns.
We'd
And
love
so
that.
Could kind of share with you, I luckily went to a conference, have another superintendent work with another construction company, really great template for student internships, kind of working side by side in a real way. So we'll continue that story on.
Well, we do need to
more.
replace those construction workers, so.
Right, that's what we're
Yes,
thinking, right?
uninsured,
You
that's
know,
true.
so more to talk
We've
about there.
We've had students both in, you know, more, call it management positions, but also then if there's students interested in the trades, there's various programs with some of the unions where they can spend a summer working as a tradesperson alongside the rest, that's awesome. That's what I did growing up. You know, I cleaned job sites with the broom, and, you know, you learn a lot. So we'd embrace that in whatever direction you
It's great.
want to go.
Great.
Well, I do have a flyer. I was going to present that and also with the flyer right away, see?
Sounds like we have your buy-in to that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes.
Great.
You
Thanks for a
have
great
a
job.
flyer as in only one?
No, yes, but it's just one company.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks, you
all right,
guys.
thank you.
I'll grab
You
it from
know,
you.
really great job.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much
much.
for the
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, he'll contact you. Excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, next we have our AFT report. No report tonight. No report, okay.
Mrs. Kishline was very excited to use the new mics, but
Thank you. All right, anything on the IASB governing board report?
indeed, very important. And I don't know if the students received this, so check. Oh, they did, good. So this is an unusual circumstance. Mrs. Luann Johnson, who's not here this evening, is our delegate, and you all have a copy, and I'd really ask you to take a look. Usually what I will do in the next month is give you at least some recommendations I have. Luann Johnson will go to a meeting, I believe, on Saturday, November 23rd, and she will vote on behalf of the board on these resolutions. Oftentimes, we have a board meeting after the III conference. In this particular case, we have a board meeting before the III conference, which gives you an opportunity in this segment of our agenda to talk about these resolutions. These are non-binding resolutions. They don't have legal weight. But in essence, what you're doing is you're directing your association, Illinois Association of School Boards, to advocate or not advocate for certain, aspects. And there's everything in here, from proposals from sister boards of education on dual language, a position on tax increment financing, on healthcare coverage, on organization and elections. So basically, you are giving your state association its sort of direction on what it should lobby for. So take a look, and we'll be back in a month to talk about these in this segment.
All right, well, thank you. All right, Foundation Board Report.
These are very fancy. I'm assuming it's on. Okay. So I, was
Does
just
she
gonna
need to
kind-
be closer?
I'd pull it a little bit closer.
Okay.
Everybody's learning. And you can pick it up,
Oh,
Andrew.
okay, all right, I don't want
It's
to,
portable.
I don't, I don't want to make it make a funny noise. Just wanted to review that we did host the Taste of Lockport this year. It was our third annual. And I appreciate the attendance from Candace and from Ann and many community members that came. We had a really great response from the vendors that attend. They like going, you know, we do not charge vendors for attending very often. Those kind of events will have a fee. We feel like it's the perfect opportunity for the school itself to, you know, welcome in everyone that we can in the community and offer a place to showcase some of the culinary delights that we have in our community. The bands were a lot of fun. We had a different layout this year. Our entire board volunteers for it. It's by all accounts a great event. And we, of course, raise money for the scholarships that we provide in May. So it's kind of like a win-win-win for the foundation, the community. The board is looking forward to doing it again for the 4th annual in September of 2025. And I'm also very pleased that we hosted Young Hearts for Life. We had over 1,000 students that came through to get their EKG screenings done. Very grateful to the PE department. We fully interrupted that whole day for them. While some students may have come to class late that day, our physical education department, from health to driver's ed to standard classes, were fully interrupted by having the kids participate. But obviously their support was really, really welcomed, and I appreciate their partnership in that. We were able to identify 10 students that required additional medical training treatments. So we don't have that information. The nurses and the staff from Young Hearts for Life does all of that. I know a lot of parents often wonder, when they find out, you know, should they have known? They call them that day. So, you know, so if you see someone in the community, they're like, how come I haven't heard? They should have heard by now, one way or the other. But we don't house any of that information here. We get none of that information here. We don't know the student's name or any of that information. That's done through their program. But again, you know, if 2 kids would have come for an EKG screening, we would have put the same program together for them. I think it's well worth all of our efforts. And like it was stated before, having a couple hundred volunteers in the school is it's really great to be a part of. Very grateful for Shepherd on the Hill. They allow us to park. Our volunteers park there, and the transportation team has a shuttle that runs to bring them in. So it's really great. It's again, a nice full community event that we're able to do. I'm a firm believer that the school is kind of like the heart of our community. It connects all of these things together, and by welcoming people in, it really promotes that and showcases who we are here as Porters. And then just real quick, the Nutcracker is coming back. I think I've mentioned it before. The tickets are on sale. The goal would be that it could be one of those nice things that kind of becomes a Lockport tradition to bring the arts into our community in a much different way than having to go downtown, or even, you know, Joliet does lovely things too, but it's really great to have it here in our own school and accessible to families and students on hopefully a very easy and affordable way of watching a holiday tradition. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
All right, okay. And then as far as the legislative report, there is none.
There is no legislative report. And I might as well just keep going. No
No
public
follow-
comment
no public-
report
no.
either. And I appreciate Board Member Zion Navarro giving a shout out to the community forums, last one this week. And that's been almost a form of public comment in and of itself. A consensus that I'm seeing develop there is one that we can't come to a consensus, that's what Jerome McKibben told you 2 years ago. And that, in some ways, I think that's okay. That's maybe the identity of the community. He felt it was that diverse. The second is that there is tax aversion. When people have a choice to voluntarily increase their own taxes, they understand property taxes, but when they have a choice, that's a difficult situation for them to be in. We've heard so far in 2 situations strong support for the concept of a separate freshman treatment. 7 school districts coming into one. Very, very strong support for that. And then also very strong support for renovating, repairing, maintaining, sustaining existing facilities have been sort of the 4 themes that we've been hearing. So we are doing an exit slip, so when we're all done, we'll bring the board what that exit slip is, what folks who were at those sessions said once they left.
Are we using the same AI generating company to do that, or are we just
We are,
manually
yeah,
looking?
we're using Innovate K-12. They have a QR code that we use and similar kind of questions that they ask. So.
Okay.
All right. Okay, moving on to public comments. At each regular open meeting, members of the public and district employees may address the school board during the public comment section of the agenda. Individuals appearing before the board are expected to respectfully follow the guidelines of Policy 2:230 and Policy 8:30 available upon sign-in. Public comments are important to the board. However, it is customary not to respond on issues until time has been taken to gather information and discuss all options. Lack of action or response at the time of comment does not imply lack of interest in the issues brought to the board, and we have none. Okay. Next, moving on to communications. Ms. Garrettson?
All right, we have 2. Dear members of the board, I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for your kindness and thoughtfulness during the unexpected passing of my mother-in-law, Mary Ann Pryor. The beautiful flowers and your words of encouragement have meant a great deal to my family. Thank you, Dana Pryor. And then the other one is a card. Thank you for being so supportive during our difficult time for Jennifer and Arturo Riviera. So thank you for sending
Thank
those
you.
cards.
All right, thank you. All right, and we have no Freedom of Information request, and then we're moving on to our approval items. Let's see. Do I have a motion? I'm going to combine these 2, September 16th. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 16, 2024 board meeting and the closed session meeting minutes of September 16, 2024?
So moved. Second?
Second.
All right, it's been motioned by
Pick your favorite.
Mr. Lance Thies and second by Mr. Navarro. No questions? All right, roll call.
Gerritsen,
Yes.
Navarro,
Yes.
Tease,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, I'll combine those other 2 also. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the September 21, 2024 special board meeting and the closed session meeting minutes of the special board meeting of September 21, 2024?
So moved.
And I'll second that. All right, roll call.
Navarro,
Yes.
Tease,
Yes.
Gerritsen,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the October 2024 board expenses?
So moved.
I can second that. All right, are there any questions? All right, hearing none, roll call.
Navarro,
Yes.
Tease,
Yes.
Gerritsen,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, then moving on to our treasurer's report. We'll have Stephanie Coy. All right.
And we have special guest star from PMA Financial this evening, so I'm going to turn it over to Jen and turn it over to Stephanie. And Jen, I've only met you on Zoom, so I'm glad I'm meeting you in person. So good to see you.
Welcome to our district.
So, does the board have any questions on any of our normal financial reports? Because otherwise, we will spend the time letting Jen talk about life safety bonds and the
No, thank you.
process that we would, ready to do so, that we would go with. Because there's really nothing new or out of the ordinary in the regular financial reports. They're the same reports you'll see every month, so there's nothing new or in addition to. So this is the time that we thought that we would go through the presentation on life safety bonds.
Okay.
All right, fabulous. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Good evening, everyone. So with the hard copy presentation in front of you, I'm going to start on slide 3. We thought it'd be worthwhile to cover some key terms and definitions as it relates to municipal bonds in general, just to make sure everybody's up to speed and understands what I mean when I say debt service and key terms like that related to bonds. So school districts, like District 205, can issue bonds to finance their capital projects. What that bond is it represents essentially a promise that the district is going to pay back the investors the amount of money that was borrowed, that's called principal, and then the interest associated with that pursuant to a fixed schedule at the time that the bond's priced. So that principal and interest together is the debt service. That's the full payment schedule that's owed to the investor. Both my pages there. So municipal bonds typically are amortized over a period of anywhere from 1 to 30 years. The bond and interest, or B&I levy, is the property taxes that the district might levy to pay back that debt service on general obligation bonds. Typically, municipal bonds are tax exempt, meaning that investors are able to receive federally tax-free interest payments on those bonds, and in turn, they offer a lower rate than they would to a taxable investment. So that's the appeal to an investor for municipal bonds issued by the district. Okay? So the debt service extension base, or DSEB, is something we wanted to highlight a little bit. When my colleague Bob Lewis was out a few months ago, this was kind of among the covered topics. There have been some legislative changes since he was out, so I'll touch on those momentarily. But to recap, that debt service extension base, because the district is tax capped, you have an annual limit on the amount of your bond and interest levy that you can extend to repay non-referendum bonds. The original DSEB was established back when tax caps were put in place, which was 1994, and it was equal at the time to just to the amount of non-referendum debt service that you levied in 1994. Since 2009, that original debt service extension base has grown by the lesser of CPI or 5%, just like your tax levy. So your original DSEB was about 1.8 million. Now for 2024, that has grown to 2.6 million. Okay?
Next page illustrates that.
Yes. So then on this chart, slide 6, there is a solid red line that represents the debt service extension base currently at 2.6 million. The dotted or dashed red line that you see increasing is just a hypothetical representation of what that might grow to if CPI is 1.5% per year. The blue bars represent your existing limited tax debt service on the 2 bond issues that you have outstanding. So you can see those payments are about 1.3, 1.4 million for this year, which is the gray bar, and next year for levy year 2024, and then they start to drop a little bit. So the deadline to impact the levy, if the district were to issue more bonds, is by February 28th of the following year. So if you wanted to issue bonds to impact levy year 2024, the upcoming levy, you have until February 28th of 2025 to issue the bonds that would do that. Okay. So on slide 7, we're going to highlight a couple of legislative changes that have occurred over the summer. So after Bob Lewis was last in front of the board. And one of those is that voter-approved bonds, starting with this upcoming election in November, no longer would count toward a school district's statutory debt limit. Previously, you would have to go to the General Assembly to get that exception for the referendum bonds, but that's no longer a requirement. Bonds and debt certificates that are issued for capital projects can be issued up to a period of 30 years. It used to be limited to 20, but again, you could get that exception from the General Assembly, but now everybody gets 30 years automatically. Lastly, and probably the most relevant to the district's plans, because it's related to life safety bonds, is that for the district and any tax-capped school district, bonds issued for life safety purposes no longer are restricted, the payments on those bonds are no longer restricted to that DSEB, to that debt service extension base. So a few months ago, that was not true, and now we have this new legislation that just gives districts like 205 a little more flexibility with how they can issue their payments for the bonds.
And so, as I've talked about that before, that legislation means that if we need to potentially, after we issue some life safety bonds, like we talked about, like the board has talked about for these central projects, it doesn't tie up the debt service extension base if we want to do something or need to do something at central. I mean, at East, rather, right? Like, otherwise, we're restricted more on what else might we do if they were taking up that limit. So the intent is not, or the thought behind this for District 205 at least, is not that, oh, we can issue more debt. That's not the flexibility, that's not the flexibility we're looking for at this time. We're looking for it leaves us the extra capacity if something happens down the road, or we want to do something else in the future.
Okay, so on slide 9, we are highlighting the process for issuing life safety bonds. So first thing is, after the life safety approvals are received, which are in process, the president would sign an order calling for a Bond Issue Notification Act or BINA hearing, which is a lot like a budget hearing typically, at the beginning of a board meeting. Life safety bonds, unlike some other non-referendum bonds, like working cash, for example, do not require a 30-day petition period because they are for life safety purposes, so it makes sense that there wouldn't be a petition for that. After the BINA hearing is held, the board can move on to a parameters resolution to actually authorize the sale of bonds. So that parameter resolution would include various maximums and minimums. For instance, the maximum amount of bonds that you would issue, the final payment date, the maximum interest rate, things of that nature. Delegates would also be named in that resolution who would ultimately approve the sale when it happens. So typically, the Director of Business Services, Superintendent, Board President, Vice President are named in that resolution. Ultimately, it would be one administrator, one elected official who would be asked to kind of stamp, to give their seal of approval, if you will, on the final results of a bond issue. That authorization expires 6 months after passage or the next board election. So in the district's case, it would be through April, the beginning of April 2025. And that parameters resolution is nice because we have flexibility with the timing of the sale of the bonds. We're not limited to having to sell bonds on a board meeting day. Sometimes there's economic news that we don't want to compete with, or we want to beat perhaps on the day of a board meeting. So that parameters resolution gives us that flexibility to move around the sale so that the district gets the best possible outcome. And then the bonds, we would expect that they would be sold by competitive sale, which is what the district has done in the past. And I'll show you kind of the sample results and what that might look like on the next page. But finally, once the bonds are sold, the parameter resolution, along with a notification of sale, which actually outlines the final details of the bonds, get filed with the county, and that is how the levies are established that the county will extend so that you can repay your debt service. Okay. So on page 10, this is just a sample auction result for a competitive sale of bonds. So what happens is, on the day of sale, underwriters would be invited to place bids on the district's bonds. And you can see here for Hinsdale School District 181, earlier this year, they sold about 17 million of general obligation certificates. They received 12 bids from various bidders. We would expect that with the district's strong credit rating, you would also see some great activity on a competitive sale, which is why that's what we would currently recommend. And at the end of the day, They're listed in order of the lowest rate or true interest cost, TIC, as it's abbreviated on the auction results you see on slide 10. And so in this example, TD Securities provided the lowest rate for Hinsdale certificates, and that is who ultimately was chosen to underwrite. Okay?
And we can only choose one of those, right?
Correct, yeah, and you want to choose the one that's offering the lowest rate, but yes, it's an all or nothing bid, so each underwriter is offering to buy the whole transaction at that rate. Okay. So on slide 11, we start talking about just a few things, a few tests to keep in mind regarding tax exemption of municipal bonds. One of those, and probably the most important to make sure we meet, is that the expenditure test, which means at least 85% of the bond proceeds would be spent over a period of 3 years. This is a reasonable expectation test, so, things happen, construction slows down for various reasons. It just means that at the time you issued the bonds, you had the reasonable expectation that most of the proceeds would be, spent within 3 years. The time test is a requirement that 5% of your proceeds are at least assigned to be spent within the first 6 months, meaning you don't actually have to pay the invoices, but you need to be contractually obligated for at least 5% of the total amount. This is usually fairly easy for districts to accomplish, with architect fees and things like that, architect contracts.
And the purpose of these tests is so that the districts can't just issue bonds way ahead of actually having a plan to do.
Exactly. The IRS does not enjoy issuing bonds, tax exempt bonds being issued too far in advance. If you wanted to issue them taxable at a higher rate, they would be fine. But of course, we don't. So the final test is a due diligence test, and the classic example of what this is referring to is you don't want to wait until the last 6 months of that 3-year period to start spending the proceeds. That does not make the IRS too happy. They want to see that there's some spending going on kind of throughout that 3-year period. Okay. All right, so slide 13, another concept we wanted to talk about this evening is arbitrage. So arbitrage is the difference between what the district can earn on their tax-exempt bond proceeds at the bond yield versus the earnings on the bond proceeds investments if you can invest in higher yielding securities than the bond yield would otherwise allow. Typically, under normal circumstances, the district would have to pay the IRS a rebate, an arbitrage rebate, for any earnings beyond what you could invest in at the bond yield. So this is understandably a more hot topic when short-term investment rates are high. And they still are relatively high. The Fed is starting to cut their rate, and that affects those short-term investment rates. So as those rates fall, it's less of an issue, but we would perform an analysis for the district as we get closer to the actual sale of bonds. But the reason we would perform an analysis is that there are some exceptions available to you to avoid paying back that arbitrage rebate to the IRS. So on the next page, which is page 14, one of those is the small issuer exception. So for schools doing construction projects like the district, if you issue no more than $15 million of tax-exempt bonds in a calendar year, then that whole $15 million issue qualifies for the exception to arbitrage rebate, meaning you can earn as much as you want and it can exceed the bond yield, and that's fine. You don't have to pay that back to the IRS. There is also an exception available to the district if you did not want to split the financing in two and would prefer to issue one bond series. If you are able to meet a 24-month construction exception, that's usually the most attractive one and the easiest one to follow for districts, given the 3 options you see under spend-down exceptions on page 14. That's the one highlighted in blue. This is an all-or-nothing situation. So for each target you see there, beginning with 10% of proceeds spent within 6 months, 45% of proceeds within a year, ultimately all of the proceeds spent within 24 months of issuing the bonds. If you were to miss any one of those targets, even if it's the third out of the 4, then you would lose that exception. So it does require, some good diligence and good tracking to make sure that you are able to stick to hitting those targets. So unlike the tax exemption, which is just a reasonable expectation, these are actually hard targets that you'd have to hit. But again, with short-term rates falling, we would perform an analysis closer to when the district's ready to issue bonds to see if we should, recommend maybe taking advantage of one of these options. Okay.
Our last slide is an
Yes,
illustration.
last one. So this is just an update of a life safety bond scenario, and really the big update here is there's no red DSEB line. So that DSEB, should you need it, is left available to you, but otherwise, for illustrative purposes, the green columns you see here is the proposed debt service on the life safety bonds. Just like when Bob was here several months ago, we have the first 5 years going up to 2.6 million, followed by a drop off in debt service. So that increase to a median homeowner for this 25-year structure would be $35 in that first year, where it increases between 2023 and 2024. And then after that 5-year period, the debt service payments do fall off, or not fall off, they just drop. And that drop provides the district with some flexibility. If you were in a position where you needed to issue more bonds, that drop reduces the tax impact potentially on that future financing. Or it just drops, and then there's some relief to your taxpayers.
And this schedule is scheduled, for illustrative purposes, affecting the 2024 tax levy. But if we weren't ready to do that until after February, right, the impact to the taxpayer would be the same, because if you'll see, it would still be just going from the 2024 number up.
Yeah, the existing debt service in this current levy cycle and next cycle are already the same, so the impact will just be shifted by 1 year.
Correct. Is there any questions about the timeline, any of the concepts around our issuance of debt?
Yeah, I mean,
Strategy.
Yeah, from what I remember from previous conversations and kind of some of the strategies that we've talked about related to Central, what this option offers us, and please correct me if I'm not interpreting this correct, is that we can time bond issuances based on the dollars that we need to tackle X projects, whatever X projects are. So if in year one it's tuck pointing and the roof and something else, and we want to issue, let's just say, 5 million in bonds, minimizing that taxpayer impact to almost $5 or $4 a year, that is an option that we can take, which, to a lot of the things that we've heard related to living within our means and trying to make smart decisions within, renovating existing facilities and keeping costs low and things like that, is certainly appealing, as opposed to a referendum alternative, which is all or nothing right off the bat, which is an relatively immediate hit at that maximum level. Obviously, it gives you lots of flexibility to try and get everything accomplished in a shorter period of time. But when we talk about some of the things that we've heard in the facilities meetings and the town halls that we've hosted, this option, at least to me, seems like a good middle ground to accomplish many of the things that we have been told about our facilities. And so I just want to confirm that I'm hearing that right, that it doesn't mean that we have to issue 26.2 million all at once. And so that number of the $35, maybe, when I spoke on May, whatever date that was, that was an assumed, 26.2 million. But I guess as a clarification, now that we're working through this process, it's 26.2 that could be issued in total at some point during the renovation work that we would be doing for life safety.
Yes, that's true. My question to you is about the parameters resolutions. If we were to issue
Right.
them, we would have to be doing multiple resolutions if we were to do multiple small batches.
Sure.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so every time, the steps would have to be taken that we outlined on that.
Right.
And
I guess
that
from-
is, and Jen probably knows that, you probably heard me, like, I use not an industry phrase, stacking debt.
Yeah.
There are districts that sort of stack, but have to go, what you have to do is every time you have to go through the process, right? And you do have to be, as Jen said, very sensitive.
Right.
Right, because really what the IRS is getting to in school districts, we don't like to pool money, slush money.
Right.
That's not getting spent for any reason, especially debt that that's tax-free, right? So it really gets into, thus a conversation with a construction manager who helps you with project timing,
Right.
right?
And I guess that would be the point is, if Berglund is ultimately hired as a construction manager, and as we continue to roll out a phasing in projects based on what we have discussed as a part of our resolution, I want to make sure that we are pre-planned for that, whatever it is, if it's a 5-year time frame, a 10-year time frame, or whatever to accomplish those things. I want to make sure that we're making smart decisions to balance that impact to a taxpayer, property tax bill, with the improvements that we can get around, while still keeping in mind that resolution, the parameter resolution, to make sure that we're not overextending, and not able to accomplish those projects within the timeframes that are associated with it. And so really just solid planning for our work, I think, would be paramount to me, to make sure that we're managing these things in full respect to our taxpayers, in full respect to our facilities and our staff and all that kind of thing, to make sure that that is a managed process.
So I have another question for you, Jen, about the multiple issues versus one. Do you have any idea or experience in what that does to ratings? Is it better for an issuer to issue in like 2 chunks instead of 4 or 5 chunks? Does that matter as far as also how many bids you might get, things like that?
Sure. It likely wouldn't impact the district's credit rating, given the magnitude, the 26 million. It is not too impactful on the district's debt burden. However, one of the things we'd want to consider is the cost of issuance for each transaction. The more tranches, if you will, that you have to get the bonds issued, the more times you're paying cost of issuance. Now, it doesn't double if you split it in 2, but there are increased costs with making, more and more phases. So that's something we would want to consider.
And market conditions.
And market
Market
conditions, that's
conditions, if we're kind of going more debt issuance year to year, as we've seen, the market can change dramatically. So that's another, concept behind timing, right, that we'd want to be conscious of and astute about.
Okay.
I have a quick question, just because I'm familiar in learning, but when these bonds are issued, I just want to make sure that I'm thinking about it properly. So when you're analyzing the market and the timing to do that, and you find the conditions are ripe, once that bond is issued, those parameters that you put in that bond, they don't change over time.
That's
Right.
right. So whatever rates are set on the day that the bonds are sold, those don't change. They would be fixed rate bonds. So over the life of the, for this illustrated purposes, we have a 25-year structure. That rate would not change.
Okay.
Unless the district were to refinance to a lower rate in the future, because municipal bonds do come with a prepayment date. That's usually, the first eligible prepayment date is about 9 to 10 years after issuance. So at that point in time, if circumstances so warrant, you could refinance potentially to even lower rates at that time for the balance of the structure. So
Okay.
there is some opportunity to reduce the payments, but they wouldn't go up.
And we have done that in the
And we-
past
yeah,
with
we-
previous
I
bond
remember that.
issues.
Okay, thanks.
That's what's sort of put us in a good position. And one of the things I'm really glad that Jen highlighted, the change in legislation. Because one of the great things, bonds are a very solid way for municipal structures to finance the things that they need, both at Central and also we have life safety needs here at East.
Yes.
Folks might find that surprising, but as you pointed out, Lance, there are sections here at Central, here at East, the oldest sections of East are the same age as the newest sections of Central. Think about it for a moment. And so one of the interesting things is, one, now that we're able to go 30 years out, that's a dramatic change. It's really what the state has done in not reinstituting the school construction grant process. It's a midway point, to get schools back into the construction business. But what it also does is something I think that's very fair. If the board can limit, the contribution of taxpayers now, but it also enrolls future taxpayers in the well-being of the district's facilities, which is fair enough. Folks that we don't even know who might move into the district years from now, when we're not even around, also bear some of the cost because the loan is 30 years. You don't have to make it 30 years. So that seems to be a very balanced approach to an asset that's durable, right? One of the things that sticks around for the longest amount of time.
And we heard Berglund Construction say that our buildings, are solid and can last that long, yes.
And you as a board have heard quite a bit about taxes, about property taxes. I think the message that you've heard is managing that. You can't control the assessed value of a person's home. You can't control the other taxing bodies. You can't control property tax caps, the CPI, but this is one way that you can make some progress on your facilities, both for students and the community and teachers, while trying to manage that burden in ways that you've already done through, a property tax abatement, through, approving a budget that really is not an increase last year to this year, through all of your work with salaries to maintain, that's your biggest cost. It's maintaining salaries, slow growth over a number of years to really kind of keep your hand on what it means, the bottom line for taxpayers. So this is really part of controlling what you can control in the most direct way. I also think part of this presentation is you are probably, I think, sitting there like me saying to yourself, wow, Jen seems very competent, right? And part of having Bob and Jen come and present to you is to build your confidence in PMA Financial, that you have a broker that is going to be, thinking about your interests and what will assist you in terms of their advisement.
And another thing to consider as we're considering when we're going to issue debt and things, looking at the chart on slide 15, in December, the board is going to pass resolutions to abate the current payment, that means that blue section will be paid out of fund balance. And if we were to issue bonds by this year, then it's almost just like we're just replacing that.
Right.
Because they're somewhat equal segments there. So if we were to issue bonds in February, working backwards, when would binding hearing have to be and when would parameters resolution have to be?
Sure, so
It's already October.
Right. No, very good point. So we could issue the bonds, early February, let's say, kind of at the latest, so that we can issue by the end of that month. So typically you sell the bonds and a few weeks later you close on them. There's a package of closing documents that'll get sent, so a few things have to happen between the sale and the closing. So we would typically allot about 3 weeks. So working backwards from a sale in February, probably that January meeting, we could do a parameters resolution, and that would mean that in December, you'd hold your BINA hearing. So you have a little bit of time, but to your point, Stephanie, being already October.
If the board decides to sell some to impact the 2024 year. If not, we have plenty of time.
Right.
But that's just, I thought it would be important for the board to consider as we move forward is all. So that we didn't miss a deadline if the board chose to do that.
I have a question relative to the comments that Lance gave about various projects and, project planning. Is that something that your organization does? Do you work with, I don't know, with the construction crew as you try to develop, your project plans and then help with the timing and maybe a strategy as to when you should or shouldn't, or how many tranches you should go to?
Sure.
That type of thing.
So typically, they dictate when they want to do the projects. They're the experts in timing on construction and all of that. But we would use draw schedules that they provide the district in order to help you phase in, if that's the board's preference, various, financings to accommodate, take advantage of potential interest earnings on the bond proceeds versus waiting to issue until you're closer to some projects. It really depends on what their draw schedules are showing. But we do use their materials, but we don't dictate what they ultimately recommend.
Right, so it would really, our planning on the projects is really probably
Yeah.
gonna come first. But this at least gives us the background knowledge for the timeline.
Right. Right.
I might offer that between both having Berglund present to our facilities master planning team about their information that they have discovered about the building, all the phases, as well as a conversation about this at the same time. Because where I found the answers to my questions tonight leading me is if a relatively independent group gives us a thumbs up-ish that the building can last for 30-plus years, really a helpful point for the master planning team to help us understand is, would we rather do a 30-year extension because we'll be in that building at least that long? Or is it better to try and pay it off earlier and get it under 20 years because there may be something at East that we want to hit at that 20-year mark, given some of the work that you all are doing related to bell schedules and changes in state law that may impact our facilities needs over time. And I just think that that would be a beneficial conversation for that group to have as well.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Do you guys have any questions?
No, I don't think so.
To be fair, 30 years is a lot considering we only know the expansion of our demographic by about 10 years. So it does, like, even though technically the roof lasted 109 years, or however long it lasted, right? Am I right? Or am I?
Well, the roof, I couldn't tell you how long. The last time we did a roof on Central, I believe, was 1980. So it's been, replaced, repaired. It's at the end of its patching life, is what DLA would say.
I meant I guess, yeah, that would be considered. So that one lasted quite a bit.
And probably the recommendation would be a 30-year replacement on a typical structural roof. So we're overdue, for sure.
Right.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Great report. Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We have to approve the treasurer's
Yes.
report.
Dr. Maybright, before I go into approval of the treasurer's report, Mr. Lancey's here. He did tell me that in our last motion that we did approve, that we only did the approval of the board member expenses, and I didn't include the employee travel expenditures when I read off the motion. So is that all right, or should I just do another motion?
I think you approved that entire motion.
Okay,
The motion as it was approval of board member expenses and employee travel expenditures. And just so you know why that is, those employees, just given their circumstances, getting to where they're going, cost of flights and their destination exceed board limits. So when they go over board limits, the board has to approve those.
So just to get the language, make sure the language is
Certainly
is
could
correct. As the person who made the motion, I could amend that motion to
Absolutely.
also include the employee travel expenditures as a part of that.
yeah, Lincoln second. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, now do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
I can second that.
All right, it's been motioned by Mr. Thies and second by Mr. Navarro. All right, are there any questions? All right, hearing none, roll call.
Gerritsen,
Yes.
Hughes,
Yes.
Navarro,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right. Now we have our superintendent update.
All right, and while I do that, I'm going to invite a couple of different people, Dr. Carrie Green, Lorianne Frieri, who is a parent, Lori Cristofaro, Dr. Cristofaro, and Dr. Huntington. Come on down and test out the new microphones. It's fun. My first superintendent report is, we are glad you were born. So I'm going from memory, I believe.
Oh, boy.
Mr. Lance Teese, happy birthday, October 12th. It was a signature birthday. If you're guessing 30, you would be correct.
My hair shows that. I actually was bald when I was 30. Thank you very much.
And we also have, I believe, we always want to show appreciation and make sure that our board members look good in public. November 4th,
Yep.
happy birthday to
Nice.
Mr. Zion Navarro. We won't see you before then. So happy birthday.
you.
Really appreciate you and your work. Before we dig into the annual student academic progress report, just a couple announcements. One, I think she was very modest, when you really think about Taste of Lockport and Young Hearts for Life really happening within a week of each other. I think Angela Adolph was at the Apex and then turned around and had an amazing city council meeting last week with all of our city interns, which I remember my first meeting I ever had in Lockport as superintendent was with Mayor Strite and his wife. And that city internship program was really on life support. We tried to inject some, I just took it over. And then this thing called COVID happened. And Angela Adolph has singularly made it very cool to have a city internship. So I just want to give a shout out to Angela Adolph for getting all of that done. Thank you to board members for being at our community forums. I do hope we see quite a few people. Even if you can't come to the community forum, it's great to walk the building and see how light, bright, inviting, to see what's possible. I think at Berglund, if you walk the building, you can really understand what an investment, and not the sort of track you're on since May 20th, what is possible. And then finally, I just want to point out to board members, we have a great event coming up, November 1st, Gold Card Dinner. I'm going to especially impress upon our student board members, because the truth is, when the elders in the village come to something like that, they don't want to see the superintendent. They don't care. They want to see the youth, right? And this is, we have Gold Card was instituted in the late 60s. It came with free admission to all of our events, special communications, and for the low, low cost of 65 cents, you can get lunch. And no one's amended that. So that's still the case. But it's just a great night. We have a nice dinner, hobnob with our elders, and then go.
Has anyone still redeemed that 65
No one has
cents?
redeemed it. No one has redeemed it. But
I
I'm
am
willing to-
so surprised no one's redeeming that 65.
I would, so it's fun. Well, hey, get your binders out. And I just want to, I'm really with this august crew here. And I'm going to switch over to some slides that I have that I hope I still have open. We are not, as I shared with Lance Teese earlier tonight, we are not going to go page by page, through this entire 95-page document. What this really serves as annually, this is like an annual report. It is made public to the board. It's made public to our public. It serves as a permanent artifact for as long as we keep records in this district of student achievement. Obviously, myself, Dr. Cristofaro, Dr. Huntington, our principals, we've curated the data. If we picked every data point, the binder would be multiple binders, right? At some point there has to kind of come a water's edge. And what we've primarily focused in on is what the state of Illinois does in the Illinois State School Report Card. We've used that as a North Star and a board goal as well. And so the entirety of it it's really designed to be something that we repeatedly come back to. We use it as a reference. It's a living document, not a October 21st a document. So I want to open up some slides to kind of take you through, and and also explain why we've asked the parents to come and join us tonight as well. And we're going to have Lorianne Frieri pretty quick into this. So what I've done is I've divided the presentation. It's designed to ask a lot of questions into looking at some individual profiles. I'm going to steal something from the state superintendent. I saw him present this to all superintendents when we were down in Springfield. Talk about SAT performance. Last year, the SAT, the Scholastic Aptitude Test, was the state accountability measure that's required by all 50 states by the federal government. And it's what Illinois uses. We're moving this year to the American College Test, which is the ACT. And then kind of dive into the College and Career Readiness Index. And I want to just stop here and really, if you don't mind, Mrs. Frieri, you are here late. I want to appreciate your time. And I thought maybe kind of getting you and the things that were on your mind in right away. Is that okay?
I am ready when.
You know, I know we were talking maybe like slide 12 or 14, but I figure, why wait? You know, and in truth, you know, none of us are going to begrudge you. You got to get up early tomorrow too. But, you know, meditating on this goal, and you know, certainly letting Lori Cristofero introduce why Mrs. Frieri is here. But this is really a North Star that we use. We set this goal. I think every time we have this meeting in October, we should say, is this still our goal? And your goal is all Lockport Township High School students will graduate with college credit, military service, industry credential, or viable employment history by 2025. Now, the key operative word there is the first word, all. And 100% is a mighty aim. And in this presentation, I'd ask you to look at how close we are to 100%. And certainly things like college credit and college experience classes get our students there one way. So, Lori, why is Lori Ann Frieri here? Can you tell us a little bit about that? And let's kind of get your remarks in there and give the board a chance to, you know, interact. And I've got some other things to share.
Good evening. I invited Dr. Frieri because at our last curriculum committee meeting, Board Member Garrettson was there. I think we had a fantastic meeting. Our AP coordinators came and they shared data to the board members that were there. But I think it was important, as always in this meeting, and you always are about, yep, there's data, but tell us the student stories behind it. And so also while we're asking students to take these academic risks and go into these challenging classes, we wanted to hear from our parents too. How's it going for you at home? So you might recognize the last name Frieri because Francesca was a student government member. Gianna has come in as a student government member, and she has 2 children when we've graduated from us. Another who's currently here, who she can speak about what it's like having them in their AP classes and our work towards advancing more students in having that experience. So I'll just turn it over to her.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight to talk about the opportunities my daughters have had at Lockport High School and how they have changed over the years, I think, to begin really supporting the student work and the learner experience at home. And so I was grateful when Francesca was able to enroll and select in her classes, and she was part of the beginning opportunities for freshmen that were offered here at Lockport, and we seized that opportunity. In our house, we recognize the importance of being able to practice AP skills, have that exposure, and whether or not it was what she wanted to study, I needed her to have that opportunity. And she was able to jump right into some of the early AP science offerings. She was part of the initial offerings for advanced placement human geography. From that moment, she walked in here at Lockport through to her senior year. She knew her label and identity as an advanced placement student was one that would continue to open up doors for her. And so she saw herself as a scientist, whether it was coming through the science curriculum. She saw herself in math spaces that she didn't know as an 8th grader coming in here, that she would begin to adopt calculus identities and the levels that she was working at in BC. She really did create an opportunity in my home for my second daughter to come through Lockport and embrace those same opportunities. The changes that had taken place between the time that Francesca began her journey as an AP student to the time that Gianna is now finishing her Lockport experience have really begun to create a dynamic in the home that I can see the improvements in the scheduling, the use of Compass, for example, the structural changes that provided support for my student athletes are incredible. So the idea that they can use their day, that they can connect with their teachers, that they know how to manage their time was an absolute critical game changer for the opportunities that my daughters have had. I really do value the opportunity my daughters have had to speak as AP advocates in that space, to see other students and to see the way that they could leverage their own opportunities, to be able to speak to what it would take beyond just high test scores coming out of 8th grade or as you progress through Lockport, to begin to adopt that AP identity. What would it take to see yourself in that same classroom that I don't think Francesca would have initially seen herself as an AP student unless Lockport had opened those doors and allowed her to begin practicing the skills from her freshman through her senior year. I think it's really important when the students, and especially Francesca and Gianna, have had an opportunity to speak about what it takes to be successful in AP classrooms, when they begin to internalize and communicate the success that they have had in the classes, the way they leverage teacher resources, different student groups that they study with, the way their study techniques change as a result. And it is important. They change not only for classroom readiness, but over the course of a year. How do they manage their time to begin to prepare for this exam? The energy that comes into the classroom when the teachers are excited for the preparation. It's intimidating at first, I do believe, for a teacher to have an external validation of their work, to send students into new and novel experiences. It can be extraordinarily intimidating. But when the teams start coming together, so even the late start structures that allow the teachers to be able to really think about what it would take to bring student success. When we take a look at the way in which AP's grown for my daughters, I do think it's important to recognize that the classes, the number of students taking AP when Francesca was here versus the students Gianna has exposure to has really impacted her learning experience. So as we open up those classrooms, questions began to change. The opportunity for teachers to explore instructional techniques of how to meet the needs. What does it look like for grading? What does it look like for quizzes? What does it look like for different toolbox strategies to meet the needs of diverse learners has really impacted Gianna in a way that has made her a confident learner, because teachers have been experimenting more not only in the way that they approach their late start time, but the way that they approach the opportunity for Compass, the way that they approach the way that they can expand the interactions with our students. So I really, truly believe that the way we've expanded advanced placement had taken learners that would have, from the moment they walked in, because our family culture and our academic identity in our family meant that my 8th grader years ago coming in was going to be an AP student. When I see the exit of my second daughter from this alignment and her curricular growth here, it means that Lockport has grown in a way that the classrooms, that the dynamic nature of instruction, that the peers she is surrounded by, the way she can speak about these opportunities has really cultivated a sense of pride in who she is, but also the way that she approaches her learning. And really, our story, when we look at the way in which equity and the way in which opening those classrooms, the way in which we can begin to see ourselves, does impact the way teachers begin to see students. And how do we begin to see more holistic data points of what student readiness looks like? And sometimes the old model of advanced placement looks different in a 2024 classroom setting. And so making sure that every student is made visible to the teachers in the way that they can approach being identified for advanced placement, recommended for advanced placement. That shift over the years for teachers to begin to see their students differently when opportunities are presented to them really becomes a way in which to measure progress that can't be seen always just in data and success. And it is really important to tolerate, the opportunity for students who leverage their success to make sure that they have opportunities to see students who are developing learners in the class as well, to teach forward some of the skills that they have and begin to construct schedules that are mindful and thoughtful and intentional about the work that they want to do. So I'm extraordinarily grateful as a parent that my daughters have had access to the classrooms that they've had, the instructional supports that are put in place that are growing. I never expected it to be perfect, but I always wanted to see a moment where if my learner was being stretched and our teachers were being supported in ways to understand how to meet classroom needs that were changing, that would become, I mean, it was always going to be easy to teach a very narrow group of students that would have qualified from high test scores or from narrow parameters for identification, but how do we create that dynamic learning environment through curriculum, through opportunities in instruction, and through that student experience? So for us, Lockport has opened doors in spaces for student athletes at extraordinary universities that do recognize the work that my students have had an opportunity to achieve. And I was very grateful. Two very pointed statements were made to us in my daughter's recruitment process to the University of Notre Dame. She was complimented repeatedly by, from her junior year through her senior year, where they measured her curriculum, her achievement, made sure that her grades were up to standards for admissions. They complimented Lockport's commitment to getting her into and retaining her as a calculus student, and that was a very important moment that they looked at us and said she cannot drop, and that is an important part of recruitment and admissions when it's communicated to understand that that process began for Francesca the moment she walked in her math curriculum, to know that that was where she was going to be led to, because it would have really, quite frankly, been too late to fix that once we learned that. And in my second daughter, who is a committed athlete to Vanderbilt, it is repeatedly noted that her AP access and her admissions packet that she has submitted is far more competitive and well-designed in comparison to other student athletes that are coming in. So I know specifically the gratitude and appreciation that I have to Lockport Township High School for opening those opportunities, and to hear that in a moment of senior year where you can't really go back and redesign your approach. They were supported from the moment they walked in, from counselors to teachers to other students, supporting a culture of high achievement that my daughters have benefited from and continue to open doors as a result of their experience here.
And that was a great start to our presentation, because I think it's going to pose for everybody at the table, a question, right? A question about focus and intention. Dr. Frieri talked about college credit, advanced placement, but also the experience, as I always say, in recruiting students to advanced placement. If you're going to go to a four-year college next year, you're going to take 4 or 5 advanced placement classes, so it's a good idea to get some experience now. Military service, not an easy thing. Military service has high rigor to it, needs independence, needs resilience, needs managing your schedule, needs high executive functioning. An industry credential, CNA, HVAC, welding. You heard about our students who, achieved ACE certification in auto mechanics, very rigorous. And then employment history, whether you're working at the CWC or many of our students that Dr. Huntington works with, they're taking an advanced placement class in employment at L-Town Grounds. And I bring this up just to center us all on this goal as we move forward, because of all the sort of life aspects that Dr. Frieri mentioned that come with enrolling students in these rigorous experiences. What I want to do is I want to share, 2 years ago, you were told by a demographer that you wouldn't see more students, but you would see different students. And I saw a really interesting thing that Dr. Tony Sanders did at the State Superintendent Conference, where he was talking about the cut scores, specifically at the high school level in Illinois, when Illinois adopted the SAT, Illinois made a choice not to adopt the national norms, because the Scholastic Aptitude Test compares each of our seniors Avery, and Mia, to about 3 to 4 million other students across the country. And the College Board has come up with national standards. The state of Illinois set their own standards, which vaulted them up to being the fourth most difficult accountability test in all 50 states. Very difficult. And then even went one more with a tougher, higher bar. And the state superintendent was mentioning this because with the ACT coming in, they're rethinking this. But what he did is he had pulled across the state a student that he started to say that he was seeing. And in that exemplar, I thought, well, I wonder if we have these students in our district too. So behind you, I have a few profiles, and these are real students from last year's class. And I think one of the things that we are responsible for doing is deciding about the achievement level of these students. And it's very easy in this binder. We have a lot of large averages and large numbers, but sometimes it's important to really personalize it like Dr. Freire did. So I want to give you, much like Dr. Sanders did, 4 student profiles to take a look at. Here's sample student A. This is a student who speaks both English and Spanish fluently. Finished at our school with an overall grade point average of 2.5. Took and earned college credit on 2 advanced placement classes. Took and passed 2 honors classes. Took and passed 1 dual credit class, earning credit at Joliet Junior College. Was a participant in student government and gaming club, and completed 45 hours of required 40 hours of community service, but did not meet or exceed on the state's cut score for the SAT. Very interesting. Dr. Sanders pointed out students just like this. So the question with each of these profiles is, how, if you describe this student's level of achievement here at Lockport Township High School, is this student achieving? Is this student not achieving? You know, what kind of judgments and decisions do we make about a student like this? Let me show you some of the other profiles. Student B had an overall GPA of 3.52, took and passed 2 honors classes, took and passed 4 dual credit classes with JJC, participated in 2 varsity sports, currently playing at the Division I level in college in one of those sports. Was in student government and also earned entry to National Honor Society and had 61 hours of community service. Also did not meet or exceed on the SAT in English, language arts, or mathematics. You'll see a common theme in these profiles. Student C, GPA 3.26, took and passed 3 advanced placement credits, earned college credit, took and passed 1 dual credit, was in French Honor Society, 4 years of French, hit 94 hours of community service, but also did not meet or exceed on the state's level of SAT. And then finally, you'll see that student D is very similar. 3.16, 1 honors class, 2 dual credit, 2 advanced placement classes, was on LTHS soccer, French Honor Society, 3 years of French, total of 87 hours of community service, and did not meet or exceed on the SAT. So I just want to maybe pause for a second to get people's reactions to this student performance. You know, we obviously are picking a number of performance, metrics, not just one. But I was so interested in what Dr. Sanders did at the state level to really challenge, and I think really what he was doing is justifying something that the state is doing. The state is elevating the freshman on track metric, the graduation rate metric, and the college and career readiness index, and diminishing in terms of weight standardized testing as something that's required. So I just want to open it up. Like, what would we say about these students?
I would think they were great. I mean, just looking at their profiles, I mean, they were involved in a lot of the co-curriculars. They were involved in, they took the advanced placement classes. Some of them were taking the dual credits, and it just surprises me, like, why didn't they meet exceed? Why? It's like, that's
It
the
makes you
big
curious,
question.
right?
It's the big question, like, what happened? I mean, maybe they had a bad day when they were taking that test. It's just like, you don't know. And there are some students that can be very good and everything, but I mean, they can be very poor taking tests. And, yeah, I just don't know. You know, I don't know. It's a big question, right?
Yeah, I
mean,
guess,
how would you-
I guess what I would say is, these are 4 students who appear to proactively explore all the options that LTHS offers, whether it's in sports, academics, day-to-day life, or honor societies, or a variety of those things. And ultimately, I want students who are willing to proactively explore those things, and I would consider that a successful student. Is that student going to college? I have no clue. Is that student ready to take on a career in X, Y, or Z? I don't really know. But what I can tell from this type of a student is that regardless of which path they go, they will proactively seek those opportunities to make a successful career, to make a successful college experience, to seek those opportunities to be a good person, which in the context of our vision and the board goal is what we are seeking to create. And to your point, whether it's related to just simply academics or other things, LTHS, through that shift that has been occurring over the last couple of years, is offering those opportunities for those students to explore that ability to seek the variety of different things, and seek being the key word with that, is to look for those things, as opposed to somebody who just simply settles for whatever classes the counselor tells me to go into, and yeah, I'm going to go, that kind of thing. Those people need our extra assistance to push themselves to become a proactive person. So I see it as very successful. I was never a good test taker, and so certainly you would probably look at my resume and it would look very similar to what you see on the screen. And I like to think that I've turned out okay.
We'd like to think that too. And I think, I'm proposing this because more and more this is the student that we're seeing. And, what I always encourage the community to do, the community seated at this table, the community in this room, the community on the live stream, and the bigger community, is not simply to see students as a test score, but see the full panel. Kind of enrolling the board in. I do want our students to hit all of those metrics, including the SATs. So I'm kind of teeing you up for the SAT and ACT for some things that I believe that as a district we can dig into. Yeah. Because certainly I think most fair-minded people would say that we want all that and that right. performance on a standardized test. We're going to see that change on the state level. That is coming. But even though it's coming, and I think those cut scores will be very different, mm-hmm. They won't be as simple as, meets, doesn't meet. I think they're going to be very sophisticated. But what are some things that we can do to be as strong as we are in other areas? Because one of the things that we're seeing with our students, like Dr. Frieri said, is that when our students are in their classes, in their climate, in their opportunities, they're taking advantage of them. And you'll see some things in staggering numbers. And you'll see some things later in the presentation that really confirm that. But also, I think we have a responsibility, if there's an area that we're not excelling at, we should address that as well.
Absolutely.
But I would just ask everyone to do it in balance. I don't think anyone would say that these 4 students don't have great promise. Like you said, Lance, they're investing in their future, clearly. But how can we elevate everyone? And I'll show you some things, particularly the SAT, that we just have to follow a call to action, really. I'm going to move forward. If there aren't any other comments, and I'm going to ask any of my colleagues, just jump right in, don't be shy. I do think if we dig into this Scholastic Aptitude Test, I do think we have to acknowledge what Jerome McKibben prophesized, he doesn't call it that, is really happening right in front of your eyes. He politically said that we're a tough community to have a consensus. He demographically said that we would not have more students, but different students. And in the United States, the highest correlation between academic proficiency is with income level. It is a straight one-for-one relationship, more so than any other marker, more than gender, race, language, income really dictates it. Since 2019, in 2019, when students took the SAT, 11% of those test takers were students who qualified as low income. The last time we took the SAT, it had risen to 29%. Almost a third of the test takers qualified for free and reduced lunch, and that's significant. I would, even though there are dips that I'll show you in a second, I would make a claim that there's been changes with small statistical difference over time, but really, you're not seeing a dramatic, despite the increase of low-income learners taking the test, you're not seeing those bars fall off. You are seeing the impact slightly, and as you saw in your report, there is some a small standard deviation there between the years, which tells me that I think there are some technical things that we could be doing as a school district that could reverse that. And obviously, really what we want is, despite our demographics, we do want a stair step to the right, an increase to the right is really what I want. I think, the SAT, the same test makers that make advanced placement tests are the same people, the College Board. And, ultimately, despite the demographics, I think that is something we want to aspire to. Probably the biggest clarion call, I think, for the district, and we just have to face it and be okay facing it. We're not particularly good in this country about talking about income or about race or about ethnic background. And I would not say the SAT is not the totality of a student's, achievement, and probably none of us, the adults in this room, when was the last time somebody asked you what your SAT was? You can't even remember, Many of us have never been asked that ever again, right? But it does mean something. It doesn't mean nothing. It is a college entrance exam, so is the ACT. We're coming back to that, and that is a reality. I think we just all would want our kids to have as many passports as possible, right? But we do have to acknowledge that our Hispanic and our Black students are not performing in the same way that other students are. And we have to be thoughtful, we have to be intentional, we just have to be honest about that. And we have to be targeted. We have to really figure out how can we dig in, walking the hallways of both Central and East. The question for me is, how can the same students that are enrolled in advanced placement classes, getting community service, passing honors classes, struggling on the SAT? And we can dissect that with a lot of research, but I don't think they just cross the hallway to the gym to take the SAT and become a different human being, right? It indicates to me that I think those students are telling us something that our students need. And you guys should jump in anytime. Don't any of the panel or any of the board members. But we have gaps to address, and that's a fact. But interestingly enough, what the state doesn't do, and I don't think we do enough in a community, is look at growth. And what's very interesting, both on English language arts, evidence-based reading and writing, and in math, our students actually make their growth targets. So where they come in and where they end up, they make, as a class, the type of incremental growth that the SAT says that they should. So even though you might have individuals who might not meet or exceed, as a group, we continue to see students making that growth as a group. And I think that's so important, because what that tells me is, something that Mrs. Kishline says all the time. When students come here, they grow, regardless of what feeder district they came from, regardless of if they transferred, regardless if they went to, one of our parochial schools. They grow, under the resources that they have in both math and in evidence-based reading and writing. I do want to point out something interesting to you and anybody to weigh in on this, and I don't want to go too far into this because you might get mind-boggled. But the SAT is what's called a norm-referenced test. And what that means is it doesn't compare Avery and Mia to a class that they took. It's not a test about a science class they took or an English class or a state standard. It's a generalizable set of skills like inference, synthesis, evaluation, and it tests how those students compare with other students across the nation. And it would have zero use if it didn't sort out a high and a low. Colleges would not be able to use it at all. So that's what a norm referenced test is. We do take a state test that is what's called criteria referenced. The questions are directly related to what we should have taught freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, biology, chemistry, physics, direct state standards. The performance of our students, very different. Our students on the science test way outperform the state average, but you're going to see their high 60%, 66, 68% proficiency rate will stack up with anyone around us. So it's very interesting to me when our students are tested on what they learned in class, how well they perform. It's just something I'd offer to you. It is a standardized test. It's just a different kind of standardized test. Let me just pause there. I want to make sure to make some space for, Dr. Huntington, any thoughts she has about, we didn't dive into ELL or special education learners. Do you want to tap on Dr. Green for Freshmen on Track? I've got a slide coming up for that, or really anybody who has a question, because I want to maybe take a right turn to College and Career Readiness Index.
Do we have a sense for our surrounding districts, what their level of free and reduced lunch is?
We do.
percentage-wise?
It's accessible via the Illinois School Report Card. Like us, there are some areas that are growing rapidly, and there are some areas that aren't growing at all. I don't offer this. I offer this as a comparison that I haven't made, but has been frequently made to us, for example, to Lincoln Way. And Lincoln Way is not a school district with a high free and reduced lunch population. I'm not saying there's nobody there, for sure, and those, students are in that struggle, but not the type of diversity. And if Dr. Shaw could be with us this evening, having worked in Lincoln Way, she would be the first to say that. All that means is I believe we're rich in diversity, but it means you're working with different types of students.
Yep.
And so sometimes the comparison, the straight comparison, is not an apples to apples comparison. One of the neat tools in the Illinois School Report Card is you can use that tool to find other schools just like you and see how your performance stacks up to them.
Yep.
Just real quick, because I know you folks want to say some stuff, but some observations of when I was reading this report. Going back to the profiles that you presented, when I read those initially, I thought, these are great students. They themselves should be proud, their parents should be proud, their family should be proud. But when I saw that last line through all of them, that none of them met the SAT, that made me pause at every one. And I'm like, well, why are they high achieving in these areas and then falling short of the SAT? Now, I can refer back to some of my own experiences with my own children and can understand why some of that may occur. And then, Doctor, I just want to say you spoke eloquently, and I really learned a lot about the program that I, as a parent of students who participate in AP and dual credit courses, I just wasn't familiar with, and I would say my experience as a parent differs vastly from your experience, and I think a lot of that might maybe have to do with kind of your background and your approach to how you look at things, which I think is phenomenal. But I think that might lend itself a little bit to some of the, as I listen to other people speak, maybe to some of the issues as to why some students exceeded or did well and others did not. I think there's something to be said for helping parents learn about these exams, and they're not just a test. They're kind of, all along. it's a different approach from when I took my ACT many moons ago. You know, it was just, you know, you had to take it, you had to do well, and you did what you needed to do to get it. But now it's different. You know, I'm aware of kids taking these exams 3, 4, 5 times just to keep improving. And,
Super score.
yeah, it's super stressful. And then, you know, compound that when I was looking at some of the charts of looking at 2019 and then forward, you know, there were some classes that did well in various degrees than some of the current classes, you know, last year, the year before. And, you know, they all went through something that we've never had to experience before, a pandemic. So how much did that impact on some of the results, and how much that experience did negatively impacted their growth in inference, critical thinking. You know, 1 and 1 makes 2, but sometimes it can make a 3. You know, that type of connection. So when I really enjoyed listening to you speak. I really, really did, and it was very insightful. And your explanation, interpretation of the data thus far is really very good and is very thought-provoking. So I just appreciate it all. I can't wait to hear more about what you all have to say. But I am curious, that SAT thing.
I have some thoughts for you in a little bit, some to-dos. I have a to-do list, Mrs. Garrettson. Do you guys, anything, you know, Dr. Cristofero or Dr. Huntington, you want to jump into, anything on your minds? I want to make sure.
I would, yeah, thank you again, Lori, for coming in and speaking. I loved, and one thing that really came out when Lori spoke to the curriculum committee is the value added to her students, who she said they were going to go in and experience AP regardless. But if you listen to her story about Gianna and how much having a more diverse class holistically helped her daughter's experience, because teachers are exploring new strategies, some explicit teaching in front of the whole group, or getting kids into Compass to do some reteaching, and really creating a norm that at any point you are going to experience challenge as a learner, right? If that challenge, we talk about it as the word dissonance, like that uncomfortable feeling when you can't figure it out. For sometimes, for many kids, it might be 5 minutes, but for other kids might mean like, hey, I got to come into Compass for a few days. And guess what? That's okay, because that happens to all learners all the time. So I just wanted to celebrate that. I love that. I think these two ladies are AP advocates as well, who are willing to talk to their peers and coach them, support them, encourage them. But again, I think that's the innovativeness of our teachers. And I'm not going to steal any of Dr. McBride's thunders on his to-do list, but I just would say of what he said about data, if you only knew the amount of times that we call Doris Fleckenstein, who we ask her to run these beautiful reports and say, we're wondering this. Can you dig into this? And we always assume the null hypothesis that it doesn't have an impact. And sometimes we get data back and we're like, oh, there's something clearly there. We got to go after that. So I'm just thankful that you say like, hey, we don't want to go through this like page 1, page 2, but see some broad strokes and then come back. Candace, at the curriculum committee meeting, this will be our topic for next month. So whatever questions you want us to dig deeper on.
And I think as educators, you know, they might not be there yet, meeting the standard, but what Dr. McBride brought up is that they are growing. So wherever they started from, they are meeting that growth, that expected growth. And so we're seeing that they are, you know, that we are making an impact and that the kids are growing from where they started. They just might not be there yet.
Yeah, because, I mean, you know, they're, you know, high achieving in their GPA, they're taking the rigorous curriculum, they're still trying to figure out and balance successfully, you know, being out in the community and being a good citizen and giving back, and then still balancing extracurriculars. So, you know, when you come in as a freshman, that's a whole new story of
So-
having to figure that all out.
So developing that growth mindset, that it's okay to not do well, but you just keep trying and keep working hard and keep growing. And even if, it means I'm gonna take an AP course and I might not get an A, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna challenge myself and continue to have that growth mindset.
Well, one thing that I did want to point out about the SAT, especially for our students that are EL or have IEPs and special accommodations, it is a standardized test, and that means that there's not a lot of accommodations that we can provide on that test. So imagine you're here in this country for 6 months, you're just learning English, and here's your accommodation. You can get these directions in English. That's it. That's the accommodation. So the amount of students that we've increased in the EL population as newcomers, and then we say, here, take this test, it's brutal. It's a brutal day for those kids. And they smile and they do their very best, and we applaud them for that work. But, sometimes when you look at their success in school, it's because they have an individual plan that allows for accommodations and support so they can show their mastery of material in a way that an SAT will never allow them to do.
Right.
And, kind of this was the switch to kind of by the numbers. Now, these are college and career readiness indexers that have, and this is where you have to think, okay, we sort of said to you 100%, how close are we here? And these are numbers that have grown significantly, and one of these numbers, drives me crazy how the state handles it. But at this point, 80.5% of our seniors are in some type of college credit granting class right now. Will walk out either with a JJC transcript or credit that earns them credit in college through the advanced placement, or most students both. That's a consequence of equal opportunity schools, our guidance department, JJC, and course expansions, which you heard about. But we are approaching on that metric, we're close to 100%. Also, grades matter in the College and Career Readiness Index. So what the state does is they take a look at the types of classes that our kids are taking, either in college and career readiness, college readiness, advanced placement dual credit, career readiness. Right now, 74% of the class of 2004 qualified for what's called CCRI scholar status. Only a third of our students did not qualify for that scholar status in earning grades on that sort of college and career pathway. And then finally, 93% of our students graduated on time. I really believe that number actually is closer to 99%. But as I reminded you, I think this is the last year, I can't remember, our CCC students who are doing real college and career readiness at their level count as non-graduates, even though they move on to a program that we have, which I find fairly outrageous and somewhat disrespectful to them. And I'm glad the state is changing that. Finally, superintendents, our voice has been heard on that. They're not going to be counted as non-graduates. And we had 3 regular ed students who just didn't make it with their class. We had 960 graduates last year. So I just look at those numbers and just ask yourself, how close are those to 100? Are it far away or is it close? I want to stop and maybe enroll Dr. Green, because I think with all the attention that we've had on Central, we've had a conversation afoot about the benefit of a freshman center. And one of the things that I've encountered as superintendent is, can you prove that the approach, a separate freshman center, is helpful? And usually when I use this metric and I say, well, we have this incredibly 97, 98% of our freshmen on track, people will often say, well, how do you know that if you didn't have a freshman center? Well, I'm obviously in a predicament where I can't prove that, right? But this remains, as a piece of research, the most influential year for a high school student. Success freshman year begets success in high school, failure. Many students stay in failure. Love to hear a little bit from Dr. Green, really anybody else, questions you might have. But I do think it's worth a pause, especially 7 feeder districts, a number of parochial schools coming in, the opportunity to coalesce as a fully formed academic, behavioral, and social high school student. But we continue to have 97%, 98% of the current sophomores, 97% of them were on track at the end of last year to graduate. Freshman focus, central campus, and that was despite the disruption that we had last year. So that metric did not change despite, a disruption that would knock most people off kilter. So I don't know if anybody wants to dive into a separate freshman center, your thoughts about it. And certainly Dr. Green.
I was just going to say that Dr. Osbolt came and presented 2 different times to the curriculum committee last year about what were modifications that teachers were making at the freshman center. I know you were the board, you were very concerned, how are they doing academically, how are they doing social emotional? So we did do 2 different presentations, and I just appreciate your asking. I appreciate that the building leadership was specifically asking, what are you scaling back on, and what do you need?
One of the things at the freshman center with the implementation of the teams in the houses, it really gives an opportunity for our teachers to have collective conversations about students, a holistic conversation. So you have the math, English, and science teacher and some of the elective teachers in a room, 4 days a week, where they spend, a majority of their time talking about students and what they can do to support students, what they can do to challenge students. We joke that we're the intervention center, but really it's a great facility where we can onboard students to, as Dr. McBride stated, the 9th grade year, research shows that it really truly is the best indicator of their high school success because it sets their trajectory. And we really try to emphasize that to students, how important, school is, instill those habits and intervene where we might need to, with students and try to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So implementing interventions, really not only focusing on academics, but getting kids that sense of belonging and connection to school and forming those relationships when you have, them together as a group, kind of isolated from everyone else, kind of implement and instill that sense of belonging and focus on character education, that's social, emotional, and behavior. This is kind of what we expect as porters, and we're here to support you. So if an intervention is needed, we've added many interventions, working with Dr. Christofero. This is what we're seeing from our kids. This is and, Stephanie has been great on supporting, different programs and things that we want to implement to help the freshmen so that they can be successful that first year. Because it really does not only set them on the right path in their trajectory, but it really creates that mindset of success and belonging here at LTHS and throughout their high school career. We do a lot of things, and unfortunately, the last couple of years, we've had to kind of shift gears on, some of the assemblies we have, but really trying to get back to that and instill that in our freshmen, that it doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't, and I say that to them the first day of school, it doesn't matter what junior high you came from, where you were at, this is a fresh start, a new beginning, and we're here to help you. And I think that, the teaming process with our 8 periods and the teachers meeting in teams and the kids being in houses really does help support, their well-being, as a student holistically.
So to do checklist, you got to have one. I think there's 3 things that we could do based on this academic report. The first is build on a good thing. Continue expanding advanced placement and dual credit. There are, we have the metrics, we have the success, we have the test performance, the transcripts, we have the experience you heard Dr. Frieri mention of her daughters being in a more and more diverse environment and how that pushes teachers as well to think differently about students and their capabilities. So equal opportunity schools, freshman focus, continue looking at career pathways, high quality classroom instruction. I would make the argument that we need to be doing a little bit what Dr. Frary mentioned, thinking about Compass and very strategic, on-site, supported test prep. Mia, Avery, did you guys take test prep? ACT, SAT? Avery, no.
No.
Mia, yes.
Yes.
So right now, our students, if they take Princeton, Excel Edge, that is outside of school, in the evening, on their own tuition. So you can already imagine there's a number of barriers to some students taking that. In that test preparation, there are strategies that do have academic value beyond just understanding what these tests. And some students, we just know, are going to be more able and more ready to navigate. Sometimes last year, you might remember, I had lots of SAT test questions for you. They're very challenging. And they're designed to fatigue students. Make no mistake, they're designed to separate students out and fatigue students. And once you can learn how to navigate that and not be fazed by that, we have all sorts of students, you know what they actually do? They read the reading passages. You're not supposed to read the reading, you're supposed to scan it. And many students don't know that that test is set up for you to scan the passage, not read it. But that'll hurt you time-wise, and now there's a time pressure. And maybe you won't answer a set of questions because you just didn't get to it. So increase that access, and another thing on SAT is, we've talked for this for a number of years, but we're highly invested, so invested, we're working with District Management Group on academic return on investment. The biggest investment we have in our district is every Wednesday, professional learning communities. There is really nothing else that we do with our staff that costs more. And the singular question that I have is, because of that interaction, are our students growing in inference, analysis, synthesis, and reasoning? And we just have to have the courage to really ask ourselves, in high school, we tend to teach a lot of content, but are we really teaching those core skills? Because just like a human body, no core, no tight core, lots of problems. And we have to find out, are we doing that? To what extent we're doing that? And how can we improve on that? How can we get better on guaranteeing that for all students? Our test results, when we break out, when we itemize on the SAT, are telling us that even our best students are struggling with some of those core skills. So very important. And then, I mentioned academic return on investment, just digging in and really asking ourselves in a research way, hey, is that happening? Yeah, Dr. Frieri.
I would like to speak to that very quickly, because I think that despite the success that my daughters had in advanced placement, they didn't know how to transfer their new skills to being able to see how it would express itself on probably the most important of all of the exams. And that moment left to chance it really undermines the work of our teachers and the full year preparation that they have in content and skill. And then to not have the larger discussion of now how vocabulary has increased, how reasoning has increased, and how they can be successful in new and novel settings, that you don't have to have that exposure to that question. And it is a true gap that when we leave it to students, even the highest performing students, to emerging learners, you really do struggle to see that transfer and to make that process very transparent for our teachers, and an explicit moment to make that learning visible, not only to make the learners in the process visible, that all learners have access to it, so that the community is strong, so that my daughter can turn to someone and say, how are we going to get this right next time on a test, or how are we going to approach this together, that we also seek to help students navigate those new skill sets in this probably most important exam that they will have taken in their life, and to manage all of the other stressors that come along with a test that doesn't honor necessarily that preparation of explicit instruction leading to success on a test. How do you manage all of the other feelings and readiness for tests? And that is something that is left to the privilege of knowledge of families, as we were talking about earlier. And and resources. And it is really important for all students to be able to come together in a community of learners that begin as early as we possibly can. Simply the same way with advanced placement exposure, you're only going to strengthen those skills and that ability to transfer. So I would honestly say that had been a gap that is difficult to expect a student to be able to navigate, but also for our teachers to be able to pull forward what it really is, an advanced placement that we're doing in each content area, to now transfer that skill for student readiness to express on those larger tests. So I'm glad we're making not only a discussion in the district about visibility for all learners and opportunities for all learners, but how that learning will look and take place on the different ways that students are expected to express it.
And then just, finally kind of wrapping up, I know the hour's getting very late, but just, we'll be coming back to you like all things we do. This isn't, one and done tonight. We're working on equal opportunity schools, dual credit, academic return on investment here in the fall. The winter will be a time of planning, doing some piloting. We already have some plans to pilot some test preparation during Compass with some sort of beta groups to see how that can happen. And we'll really be in, I hope, the depth of academic return on investment, a research project, really just to learn. And then by the end of the year, kind of coming to completion, and when we come into staffing and we come into resources, coming back to you with what we've seen, what we've learned, and then using our summer curriculum cycle to do some implementation. So thanks so much to everybody. And I hope we breathe some life into thinking about where we go from here and just not making, this one night of data, so.
What I particularly appreciate about the in-housing test prep is that, very similar to our teachers' ability to teach differentiation between the different students and the level of learning that they each have, is we then have the opportunity to control how that happens with the people that we put in that room to help educate our students, as opposed to hiring a company. Probably nobody on our faculty is there when they're discussing those things. I remember when Jack went through that test prep program, and it becomes a lot less personal. It becomes a lot less Porter-centric, and I think that it also allows for follow-up with certain students once you start to identify some of their maybe gaps or abilities that they need to learn, just by having it in-house and being more familiar with the learners that are in that group, and being able to advertise it to get more learners to
Involved.
participate, which is a big deal.
All right, thanks, everybody. I would be remiss if I did not ask you to look at the front of your, you got a lot of players in here, a lot of great people. Thank you, Dr. Frieri. Some of them are right up here doing great work, but I would be remiss if I did not point out Terry Lazinski, who works with Lori Cristofero, and Doris Fleckenstein, two just engines behind really getting this annual report actually in your hands.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Dr. McBride,
Yeah.
could I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
Dr. Huntington? So we didn't talk too much about special needs and that type of thing. So when I was reading that, it didn't even dawn on me that, special needs kids would need to take these exams as well. So I know a little bit about 504 plans, but in terms of these exams, just what sort of, how does that look for a special needs student?
SAT allows us to apply for accommodations for students with IEPs. And so every kid has different accommodations on their IEPs. But SAT only allows certain accommodations. So we do apply for those accommodations. So many of our students may have a screen reader that they're allowed to have the test read to them. They get extra time for some of the tests, depending on, maybe they get extra time for just the writing, or just the reading, or just the math, or all of parts of the test. And then we have a small percentage of students that are exempted from taking the SAT, and those students are usually in our modified program. So they have significant cognitive disabilities.
Sure.
The state says that I can only test 1% with using that alternative assessment. However, we tend to have more than 1% of the students that would qualify for that test. And so now I'm going through a big process with the state board to really show them that, yeah, we are testing students. And some of these students, we're supposed to test anybody with a 55 or less IQ. So we do have students that have to sit for the SAT, you know, that could be at a 57 IQ, which is 2 standard deviations still below the
Right.
norm. And so it's a struggle.
Yeah.
So, we, you know, we do our very best to prepare the students for the exam as we can. You know, for some of our students, you know, parents are not happy with us, but there are requirements of the state that everybody takes that test in order to get a diploma.
Right.
So if a family didn't want their student with a 57 IQ to take the test, they could refuse it, but then they would get a certificate of attendance and they wouldn't get a high school diploma. So, you know, we try to navigate those things as well as we can and make them as comfortable as they can to take that test. But, you know, that's sometimes where you see, if we have quite a few students that don't meet that criteria cut score to take the DLM, which is the alternative assessment, those students count in our numbers as well.
Oh, sure.
And I'd really recommend, you know, Dr. Chris Farrow behind me and members of the curriculum committee, maybe to do a deep dive at some point. You'll dissect this at your next meeting, but really do a deep dive into how the achievement of our special populations, English learners, our students who have IEPs, how is that all kind of accounted for? You know, this is a sort of 50,000-foot level, but it is definitely worthwhile to understand how those students are growing, learning, and the challenges they face.
Right, because I mean, just from the starting line, that they're
Right.
not going to be able to,
Yeah.
the growth that they're having is not being measured in any way that the state looks at in this.
This particular situation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, thank you, everybody. Thanks for everybody's hard work.
No, thank you. All right, and then we have our information reports.
And can I make a suggestion with the hour? I think.
I know, I was
Can
gonna
we,
say,
can we accept them as presented?
Well, yes, but if we have any questions on those
Yeah.
reports, you know, that's what I was going to say, in the interest of time, but, you know, you saw them, if anyone has a question on any of them.
No.
All right, well, moving along. All right, we're moving to our consent agenda items. I just need an approval of consent agenda items number 2 through number 8.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been motioned by Mr. Thies and second by Ms. Garrettson. All right. Yeah, roll call.
Garrettson,
Yes.
Navarro,
Yes.
Tease,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right. Moving on to our action considerations. Do I have a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with the Will County Regional Office of Education?
So moved.
Second.
All right.
And before the voting, can I just clarify one question that Mrs. Garrettson asked? And just what this is. It's a highly successful program in Cook County, serving about 4,000 students. And I was really pleased that the Will County ROE reached out to us and said, hey, we'd really like to pilot this with one township high school in the county. And it's using evidence-based funding mechanism without damaging our evidence-based funding to identify students who could use literally a one-on-one student advocate to deal with the most difficult aspects of getting to school, whether that's behaviorally, attendance, chronic attendance, academics, home life, transportation, you name it. The target of this would be 32 students. I'm sure folks in this room could identify 32 students who need home visits, more than, you know, our school counselors, deans, and social workers can give. Mrs. Garrettson had a question about a penalty. Really what that penalty comes in is the cost of this to the board up front would be about a loss of $1,800 to $2,000 in evidence-based funding, not significant. The return would be, you know, if you had someone who was a social worker, that's about a $60,000 proposition that would be hired by the regional office. You have oftentimes asked me, Mr. Navarro, you're very good at this, is there another option other than Lincoln School? And that's really what we're talking about here, is can we avoid, you know, any kind of exclusion, expulsion, suspension? by working with our most challenged learners. And we've got a great template to look at in Cook County. The penalty is, in essence, if the school doesn't show a good faith effort to produce students, and if they don't, which I'm sure we will, then that evidence-based funding, it's all, we don't recoup that. That sticks with the ROE. It's not massive sums of money here, but it does encourage us in this agreement to hold up our end of the bargain, right?
Okay, well, thank you. All right, so it's been motioned and approved, and, okay, roll call.
Tease,
Yes.
Navarro,
Yes.
Garrettson,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, do I have a motion to approve the authorization of the school maintenance grant application?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been motioned by Mr. Thies and second by Ms. Garrettson. Any questions? All right, hearing none, roll call.
Navarro,
Yes.
Tease,
Yes.
Garrettson,
Yes.
Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, there's no policy updates.
Oh, but Kathy Maxwell wants me to remind you that it's coming. We are just a tad behind, not tragically.
All right, announcements.
Announcements, in your agenda, lots of great events. Went to an outstanding fall choir concert. We've got a fall play coming up. I hope I see everybody who can come to the Gold Card dinner, outstanding National Honor Society Madrigal dinner. We will try to get board members, if you're really interested in the Madrigal dinner, get you those advanced. Very hard to get tickets, as Angela Adolph can attest. And then we have 2 holiday concerts, choir and band, which are fun to circle on your calendar. If you can even believe that we're thinking about that.
As far as anyone, if you are interested in going to the Gold Club dinner and you haven't RSVP'd, please let Kathy know. Okay? The little slip.
And again, thank you to Matt Dusterhoff, his crew, for our new amplification. It does make a difference, and all of this is running right into the live stream too. So it makes just so many different things easy on Mr. Slager. You notice he doesn't have his giant war wagon down here. So,
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
All right, and I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
all right.
Thank you.